presume we're live?
Now we are.
So, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us once again. The second of our live web streams from Cwmdonkin Drive. This famous old house, the birthplace of Dylan Thomas, and the family home of Dylan and his family for 23 years. The place where he created over 2/3 of the material then utilised in his published works. So it's a wonderful setting for us to do this here tonight. And I'm joined by the creator of Poetshub, a wonderful site for you to come and visit. This is Robbie Doan, and the site is poetshub.com. It's a great way for poets and, well, I suppose other creatives as well. You can't rule that out.
No.
Of getting involved and meeting each other online, talking to each other through forums, advertising any events that they've got or any pamphlets or books that they've got coming out as well. I think it's vitally important that we use all of these free as well, Rob. I forgot.
Yeah, it's all free.
These free forms of technology to link us up all the way around the world.
It's a good way of building a community up, and basically, you know, you can post your own poems on there to get creative feedback and alike. Right, do you want to tell us what the lineup is like?
Well, I think I should.
Yeah.
We've actually got a green room next door, which is Dylan's father's study. Hugely important place. And it's basically one of the reasons why we're here tonight. That is the room where on a Wednesday evening, Dylan and his creative circle, the Cardoma Boys as they were known, were all invited up to this house where Dylan would hold court. It was a place where musicians, poets and artists could come and bounce ideas off one another, get a great honest feedback and critique. And this is what we're going to do tonight. We're going to actually interview the poets. We hope in future to have musicians and other artists as well come to the house. And hopefully some of the feedback, if you leave us any questions via Facebook, you can reach us via facebook.com/Dylan Thomas Birthplace. You can tweet us questions in via @DylanThomasHome also. And hopefully at the end of the night, we'll have all of the poets and guests in here, and they'll be able to actually try and answer some of your questions. So tonight, we're very lucky to be joined by Professor John Goodby, who has spent, well, I don't know how much time putting together the new Centenary edition of the collected poems of Dylan Thomas. It's a heck of an undertaking. It would be very daunting to any other man, but I think John was more than capable of doing it. And when you actually see the copy of the book, you can see the notes and the annotations that John has done, and I think you'll all be blown away. So we'll be hearing about the book, the process that's gone into making it, where you can catch John speaking live about the book. He's doing just about every festival out there. One of the most notable now is the Dylan Thomas in Fitzrovia Festival, a brand new festival that's happening. And John will be talking where you can catch him. So that really is one of our special guests. We've also got a wonderful poet, John Garrett, who will be joining us first of all in this room. We'll be interviewing John and hearing some of his poetry as well. Then we'll have John Goodby himself. He'll be in here. He'll then be joined by the Birthplace's Versifier in Residence, a position that was created for this year, the centenary year. Our versifier is Natalie Holborough. Natalie's very familiar with John because of the fact that John is, or was, I should say now, she's just done her dissertation on her course in the university. So we'll be hearing about Natalie and also some work from Natalie too. We'll then have Tim Hart will be coming in, and he'll be doing a poem with the Birthplace's owner, Jeff Haven, who's kindly stepped up to the bat today, to the plate, I suppose. So we'll hear Jeff's dulcet tones as well.
Looking forward to that.
We also have a wonderful German poet, Barbara Kirchert. She'll be in here too, talking about her inspirations and her work. And then it'll be finished off by S.J. Alexanderson. Of course, if you joined us last time, S.J. was a part of the very first broadcast as well. So that's how it's going to go. And then at the end of the evening, as I say, they'll all be coming in to this room, and we'll be fielding some questions from you as well.
And we may be moving from room to room as well, so there might be a bit of a shake-up.
Yes. Now, we're actually going to move into our green room now, the study. So if you do experience any shaking or trembling, don't worry, it's not an earthquake or a tremor, it's Robbie. All right. So that's what we're going to do now.
Right.
And Robbie will now unplug us from the charger.
Here we go. I will let you go first.
Thank you very much.
Put that one on mute now.
So hopefully they're not swearing in here or getting up to anything, any bad language. So this is the study here. And as you can see, we've got all our poets in here tonight. We've got Natalie Holbrook behind her then. We've got Professor John Goodby, S.J. Alexanderson, Steve Garrett. We've got we've got Jackie Linden here, of course, a great poetry agent, I suppose, aren't you, Jack? So she's here in support of everybody as well tonight. Wonderful to have her here. We've got Tim Hart, and then we've got Barbara Kircher as well. So if everyone wants to say hello to all of our viewers all the way around the world tonight.
Hello there, viewers.
And we'll leave you alone for a second, guys. We'll just go and get reset back up now.
Nice.
And we shall then come back in.
All right, just reconnecting. Right, here we go.
So, as you can see, folks, it's a well-oiled machine. I think you can say, the Poetshub. It's quite nice to do it in this style, I think. It's
Rustic.
not really rehearsed as such, as Robbie said, it's a bit rustic. And it is what would have gone on in this room. Obviously, all the people that came and met at this house, they weren't polished at all. They're very much like what we have here. We've got some wonderful poets. Of course, now the next step, some of them have been published, some of them haven't. And it's basically, as I say, getting a critique on work. So please feel free, if you've got any comments, to send them in. And on all the feedback is greatly received as well. So without further ado, I'll go in and get our first, I suppose, performer. Definitely a poet, Steve Garrett. So be 1 second.
No, I'm all right, I think.
Okay. If you'd like to come and take a seat on the
Thank
couch,
Well, thank you.
we'll lightly grill you.
So yeah, don't overcook me. In the middle?
Yeah, wherever you're comfortable.
Great.
And I will perch on the arm of the chair here.
I'll give you that.
And I suppose then, Steve, sorry, we're getting quite cozy here.
Cozy.
As long as you're not intimidated.
We're all friends at this house, don't you worry.
Yeah. Okay, it's 2 against 1, but
So I suppose,
give another chance.
Steve, what we'll do, we'll go into our interview. And if I just ask you, first of all, how you actually got into poetry.
Yeah. I had been a musician for quite a long time. I mean, I played in my first band when I was about 15. Growing up in Liverpool, it was kind of what you did. And I did get to play at the Cavern, but after the Beatles had left, unfortunately. But it was the original, not the one that they rebuilt later,
Yeah.
But every street had a battered old van on it, where full of old guitars. And just something that you did. That's pre all the kind of stuff.
I suppose it's kind of a crossover between music and poetry as well.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I guess I was always interested in writing my own stuff, and just wrote songs for years, refining them, collecting a stash of stuff and going back to it. And then just came to that point where I must have heard a couple of poets, and had a crack at it and thought, this is great, don't need to carry a lot of gear around. A piece of paper in the pocket. You go to a gig and people are actually listening, that they want to, you've got their attention. That is quite rare as a musician, you got to say, to get that level. And just something I love about the fact that you can squeeze a lot of thought and material. You can change the thing, and you're listening to the poet that's reading before you, can rewrite half the poem, and you know, it's so flexible and fluid and concentrated. I love it, really, I've got to say. And I'm still very much a new writer, you know, I'm still learning my craft, and coming to a place like this is great, just having the chance to listen to all these other people.
So when you first got into it then, was that through going to an open mic session?
Yeah, I'm sure it was that.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm thinking, I'd like to try that.
How were you coming forward with your poetry? Were you one of the ones that would get up first of all? Or
I tell you, I expected, the first time I went with my own poem, I expected to be terrified. And for some reason, it felt more relaxed than I'd ever actually felt with a guitar in my hand. And I can't explain why. Maybe I've always been a bit of a talker, or somehow it just felt very natural to me. I thought, this is great, you know, it seemed, it really seemed okay.
Because you do find some poets are really shy in their day-to-day life. And when they get up there, it's like a different persona sometimes. They become something else.
Yeah, well, true of a lot of musicians as well. You know, Hendrix was famously shy when he was didn't have a guitar with him. I don't know. I mean, I suppose I don't see reading. I'm not trying to do a big performance or anything, but I enjoy also the fact that, look, I read it tonight and maybe it didn't work. What often would happen on the way back, or as soon as I get home, I'm getting rid of a couple of lines because at the moment of reading, you sort of realize what works and what doesn't. That's the beautiful thing about open mics. Almost every time I've read a poem, at the end of it, I know if it's any good or not. And also, I'm probably already starting to edit it. And I mean, I did publish, I self-published a book. And the regret I have about that is I published a couple of others online. The beauty about those is you can edit them anytime you like. Once it's on paper, you kind of, there's a couple of lines in there I really wish I could change. Okay, and it's not like there's a million copies out there or anything, but I love the idea of online publishing, especially with poetry, because there is that opportunity to keep developing it and changing it.
And you can get feedback, and it can actually grow.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, you do right away. I mean, most open mics, look, people are nice and they will give you applause, and they're not going to kind of give you this. They'll be friendly. But you can also tell if it's intended to make people laugh. You can tell whether they're faking it or not. You know? And you start to learn what sorts of things work in what sorts of places. And there's that level of communication with the audience is something I never had. Playing the band, partly because they're right there in front of you, and there isn't all that lighting and kit and mics and all that, which makes everybody very far away. And also just because it's a very raw form somehow. It's just words, you know. It's just thoughts and meaning, and I love that. I love that interaction.
And they were very, obviously, the audience there in Liverpool, just off the back of the Beatles and everything going on. The poetry audience. Was that a lot more receptive then, because of the creative energy going around in the city at that point?
Oh, no, that's really interesting. You've actually reminded me, because I had forgotten this. There was a band around called the Liverpool Scene. If you remember the Liverpool poets, so Roger McGough, Adrian Henry, and those guys were hanging around in the bars where we used to play. And there was that whole Liverpool poetry scene right alongside the music scene. And I mean, those guys for me, well, I'm just realizing they've really inspired, I think, the flavor that I try to bring to it, which is kind of dry, and you know, it's not too serious, but in there somewhere, while people are laughing, hopefully, or you know, smirking, there's a bit of a sting in the tail. Or I mean, Roger McGough is great at that. I think, you know,
point over.
He's kind of gone. He's softened with age, which is quite right, you know. But I mean, Adrian Henry sadly no longer with us, but. Matt, this is before your time, you wouldn't remember the Liverpool Scene, but this was a rock band from Liverpool that went out, played all the festivals, and read poems in the middle of the set, which was, you know, and Adrian Henry was this large character, you know, came on and read poems. That was unheard of at the time, you know. And then, you know, I don't know if the scaffold would mean anything to you, but Roger McGough, it was all about art rock, bringing in creativity into music in a way. I guess rap is kind of doing something similar, you know.
Well, that's great. Of course, then just after that, I suppose you would get people like John Clark as well getting involved with Sex Pistols and you know, and bringing that into it too. So very interesting.
Yeah, so that overlap of, but yeah, God, Liverpool was such a hotbed of creative people at that time, you know. Great times. haven't been back for a while, but I know the cavern's now a museum. And all that makes, I've been there, and it made me feel a bit uneasy because it was like seeing my life in a case, you know, and I sort of felt like, well, it's died now, and it's become ossified somehow, you know. But, you know, Roger McGough is still with us, and Brian Patton, fabulous, like he was part of that scene. I wrote to Brian actually recently, and bless him, he wrote back, and that's great. That's a kind of, that's a nice touch, you know. People never got too big for their boots in Liverpool.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much to do with Liverpool itself. I see Liverpool as pretty close to what we've got in the South Wales Valleys, the tight-knit communities that you see there as well. So I think people are more receptive, as I say, to I don't know really how to put it, but to creatives, I suppose.
You know, I think there's really something about the link between struggling. You know, like life was tough in Liverpool, you know, and that, I think that kind of brings out the creative spirit, because that's all you've got.
That's right.
You've got to have humour, otherwise, you know, you're just going to give up. So you develop that kind of humour. Interesting to talk about the valleys, because there's been some great bands obviously come out of the valleys. I'm trying to think of valleys poets, you know, other art forms. Well, right now, no one's actually coming to mind. I hope I'm not going to really embarrass myself. I mean, somebody famous from the valleys.
We've got wonderful poets like Patrick Jones. We've also got, of course, Rachel Trezise, the first recipient of the Dylan Thomas Prize. You know, wonderful writer. As well. Rhiannon Edwards, Mab Jones.
Yes, fabulous.
Absolutely wonderful. It's a thriving scene. It really is in South Wales.
That's great. So it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the next question is, how did you come to be here in Swansea?
Well, you know, it is only up the road. I lived in Cardiff for a long time. Something really attractive about Swansea to me. It's kind of, it's maybe got more of its heart left than Cardiff. Cardiff has attracted more development, which is good in many ways, but it's kind of in the process become a bit more anodyne, a bit more anonymous. I still love the place. I live very close to the city centre, and I love being in the heart of things. But Jess Linden is a good friend of mine as well, you know, and she's encouraged me, and she helped me with the poems and with her experience of many other poets that she's worked with. And so she introduced me to this place. I mean, I've also been to Larne, you know, and done a night in the Browns Hotel. And I guess that the fact of when I travel, you know, there are a few names when people say, well, where about in England is Wales? You know, you can kind of say, okay, it's where, you know, Tom Jones and Dylan Thomas, and, you know, you got a poet who, I know that poets, you know, have been known to say, well, you know, he wasn't the only poet that came from Wales.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely
true. You know, to have a guy that one of the greatest singer-songwriters of the time named himself after coming from Wales is a pretty big deal. You know?
Well, if we can pin him down to give us a straight answer, Bob Dylan, if you're watching,
we know.
Please email in.
We know we do.
Give us a straight answer and just admit it, Bob. All right,
we know. That's all.
Where do you draw your inspiration from? Is it kind of coming from that background that you were brought up in, and do you find it pretty similar in Wales the way it is up north there?
Really, for me, I mean, I've always been drawn to places where people are sort of struggling to survive a bit against the odds, just because I find that that's where the most interesting characters seem to develop. And, you know, whenever I've traveled, I've been to, you know, you go to some remote village somewhere and you meet this extremely bright, creative, there's no room for bullshit, if you know what I mean. Because people, and I sort of always been somewhat drawn to that. I hope that I stick to that ethos myself. Really, my inspiration is just from daily life. Things that happen. And I think there's something in that Liverpool spirit of people making jokes out of things. Things are never just taken at face value. You know, you think of, you know, Lennon in particular, that kind of spirit. There's a bit of a wry undertone to things. At the same time, a lot of passion. But so I think that's sort of, I got that in my blood somehow. Of you're looking for humour in things, but also not just foolishness. You know, that there's also that humour in Liverpool is very much, it's pushing quite close to the line. You know, it's often quite dry, quite ironic.
Yeah.
You know, there's a point being made there, and I guess that's what I'm aiming for.
Yeah.
And just one of the lovely things about poetry is, look, something happens, and it rings a bell in your mind. It makes some sort of a lateral connection. Because I mean, a lot of poetry is trying to make unusual connections in unusual ways, make people think about things in a different way.
Yeah.
And you can just jot it down, and you know,
yeah.
then you can, that's like a little seed, you know,
yeah.
and then nourish it and write it and re-edit it 20 times.
Yeah.
Although, you know, first poems I was writing, I probably edited them 5 times. Now I probably edit them 55 times. It's just with experience, you know, you just become more fussy about what you.
Yes.
It's kind of, it can be kind of organic. You might see something on the street and think, well, that'd be great. That'd be a great subject matter. And
oh, absolutely. That's what it is. Exactly. That style. Or might even be something that really pisses you off. You know? I really like to. It's a way of letting off steam. It's good. It's good therapy. You know.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Anything creative like that can be good for your soul.
No doubt.
Yeah. Well, that's great. That's great, Steve. What I'll ask as well, is there anything in the pipeline coming up? What are you up to next? Any gigs or?
You know, there are always places to read. I'm working on. I'm thinking of basically drawing in from, and I've been working on that the past couple of days, looking at everything that I've written so far, and because although I've published myself, you know, it's not, I can actually, it's up to me, you know, I can draw from all those. Some new ones coming out. I think the new ones are in advance. I sort of feel that, you know, I'm making progress, so there'll be more of those. And I want to put together another, I'm thinking of the title Lifelines at the moment. And maybe having another crack at getting it published, you know, pulling together the best of what I've written so far. Sending it around. I mean, it's not that different from the music business in the sense that you've got to get out there, but it's easier to find places to read, I think. In poetry, there's more, just doesn't feel like such a struggle. Also, doesn't matter so much what your age is or what you look like or what's in that year, or, you know, you don't have to be dealing with all this other extraneous stuff which you have in the music business. Because luck is still there, but you sort of feel, hey, if I've got anything worth reading, somebody will want to hear it. And
it's like you say with the music industry, you kind of, if you haven't made it by such and such a time, you've missed the boat. A lot of people think.
Yes,
there's a bit of that going on. I mean, we've got the Leonard Cohens of this world, you know. And I mean, what I always love about jazz, and jazz and blues is sort of my thing, is you know, that's kind of age irrelevant, really.
Definitely.
But
the same as poetry.
Actually. Jazz, poetry, they're all very much interlinked, you know, just different ways of self-expression.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I suppose we should round it up now, and there's only one thing left to do.
Yeah.
Would you like a glass of water as well?
Yes. Well, we're going to ask you to read now.
Yeah.
That
would be great. Okay.
So if we get you to do a couple of poems, and then we'll have you back right at the end of the evening.
That's great. Okay. Okay.
Right.
Well, you've got to give me, when you say a couple, is that like is that a Welsh couple? Or?
If we say a traditional couple of two.
Down to 2. Okay, okay. Right. Thank you.
So,
thank you very much.
Myself and Robbie will come out of shot and you can speak direct.
Well,
give
me the traditional floor managers.
Yes. No worries. In your own time.
Okay, well, look, I thought I would do this one because it was inspired by one of Mr. Thomas's poems, which was written, you know, The Hunchback in the Park, Cwmdonkin Park, just around the corner. And this was because there was a poetry competition that was on offer to write something inspired by that poem. So the title of it came from there, but the poem itself kind of went off in a different direction. But this is called Just a Hunch. Born to be wild and reviled, a heart of darkness living in my shadows, a beast with no beauty, an ugly otherness ducking and diving, sneaking and hiding, masking the enormity of my deformity. But now I'm ready to clean up my act, cast off that distorted inheritance, come out in the open, stand proud, praying that you'll see through my lying disguises and, sensing a sweetness under thickened skin, kiss me deeply, until I metamorphose into a smooth amphibian who leaps without looking, long legs extending, both spring. Should maybe say that what that is about a little bit to do with one of my favorite themes is writing poems about men or about being a man, and especially trying to write things that maybe other men could relate to, maybe get them into listening to poetry. It was something to do with that. That's one of those poems I couldn't really give you a definitive analysis of it, but hey, that's okay. So, you know, sometimes people can make of things what they want. And this is very much about a recollection. And this is called My Father's Books. This is drawing on memory. There are piles of them everywhere, stifling me with their mute reproach, the great unsorted, gathering dust as if it were a precious commodity to be clutched and guarded closely. Those tombs are like tombs, encasing dead and desiccated words, now drained and faded like the soft field flowers my sister squeezed the life from in her under-consulted Oxford English. I crack one open. A reek of mold erupts, shutting my memory into recall of threadbare Bibles on cloth-polished old oak pews, sharp shafts of light illuminating a universe of dust as they dissect the gloom and ennui of the obligatory Sunday service. I head back to my laptop now, grateful for that fresh window onto a world of living information. Those books will have to wait. That's great. Can I squeeze in one more?
You can.
Yes.
Okay, this is inspired by a rugby match. I believe it was Wales Ireland that my son and I watched recently. It's called Left Field.
I don't know what the sound is like, but if you'd like to raise your voice, just in case.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I hadn't.
We'll get some feedback from next door in a minute.
Yes. Used to reading with a mic, you know, which is okay. That impossibly high spinning ball, a boot-powered upward swoop propelled with passion into the whitening sky, lifts my heart with its impudent disdain for Earth's selfish wish to draw everything to her. Yet, despite the intensity of concentration and skill, the innate unpredictability of that ovoid shape ensures that, on returning groundwards, it's the luck of the bounce which decides how the game goes. Like the chance encounter of sperm and egg which created all our beginnings, life's true randomness invites us to give up all illusions of control and accept what comes our way with grace and celebration. The game of rugby, held so close to our Welsh hearts, teaches this wisdom well.
Brilliant. That's great. Brilliant.
So always love the way that no matter what you do, the way that ball bounces, if it goes the wrong way, what can you do? It's, it gives us an excuse as well if it all goes horribly wrong.
Well, yes.
Yeah. Am I? You haven't
That's
done it yet, but
no,
always leave them wanting more.
Absolutely. Well, as I said, we'll be seeing more of you a little bit later on. Thank you very much, Steve. If you'd like to send Professor John Goodby in,
I will.
Stop the clock. So that was Steve Garrett, and we'll also be putting some links to some of the blog sites and things that you can find Steve on. And of course, Steve will be putting his event listings and things on them as well, so you'll be able to catch him pretty soon. Professor Goodby, please. Here he is. Thank you very much.
Take a seat.
Thank you, Rob.
You're welcome. Would you like a glass of water before we begin?
I'll have one while we're beginning, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Don't just start things on my account.
So, thank you very much, John. Thanks for coming, because I know that you're incredibly busy, and you'll be doing about every festival there is to be done, I suppose, in the next few weeks. As I said, including the Dylan Thomas in Fitzrovia Festival, which I know everybody's excited about, a brand new festival. But of course, we're here today to talk about the new book, one of the most hotly anticipated books of this year, the Complete Poets, with Dylan Thomas.
There we go.
An advanced copy that John has got. So you'll be able to get hold of this now. I believe it's October the 9th.
That's right.
Which goes on general sale. Hardback priced at £20. more than a bargain, I think.
Yeah, there's nearly 500 pages here.
Gosh.
So, yeah, you get your money's worth.
Wow.
We put links to them on Poetshub
Yes,
and Birthplace.
So basically, I think the questions that we've got, John, if you trawl through the internet, you'll come to an article a few years ago, actually, 2012, in the Western Mail, saying about just how Dylan Thomas, there was a bit of a furore, I think, in the article about Dylan, and the more academic side, not really coming through, that you were involved in. How do you think that's going this year? Do you think we're getting a bit more of that coming?
We're getting a fair bit. I mean, there's been a conference at Swansea University. There's going to be one at Cambridge on the 11th of October. I think there's one going on in Bordeaux, and there are several other things as well. I mean, I think there is a problem in the sense that some of the literary agencies in Wales have tended to focus on the circuses rather than the bread, and you get things to do with Undergut Wood or half a dozen poems which are already well known, the anthology favourites, and they're kind of shying away from giving people a chance to get into some of the other poems, the short stories, for example, which are equally brilliant. So I think there's a little bit of a failure at that level. But generally, I think the Centenary year has been a great thing in Wales and for Wales as well, because it's been almost a kind of pan-Welsh festival of culture.
Yes.
Dylan Thomas has pulled the whole country together in that sense. So I think that's been brilliant. I'd like there to be more of a legacy. Hopefully there will be, but I don't think maybe some of the agencies have got more of an eye on cultural tourism, let's say, than actually raising the people who do know something about the poetry already to a slightly higher level. They could have done more than that, more of that. But let's not quibble too much. It's been a good thing so far.
We've had quite a successful program, actually, especially in America, the Starless and Bible Black, part of the British Council's initiative, and that seems to be going very well as well. So as you say, I think there's a lot more of it coming into play now, which is a wonderful thing to have. Obviously, there are a lot of people that have grown up on the myth about Dylan Thomas and legend. But the main aim, especially for us at this house, is to obviously encourage learning about Dylan, but actually learning about the works, the legacy behind Dylan. That's what we should be concentrating.
I think this is the thing. One of the reasons why Dylan Thomas tends to be read in just a handful of ways is because people reading through the myth, they're reading through the legend, and that's fine. That draws people in. But what I'd like to do, and that's what this book is about, really, is actually once you've got people there, pull them into the work and say, okay, read a few of these poems as well. Read a few of the difficult ones, because they're not as difficult as you might think. Have a look at the short stories, have a look at the fictions. Just try to expand it a little bit. What did Dylan Thomas stand for? Because he didn't just stand for a rambunctious or bohemian lifestyle and poetry that came as naturally as an he was a hard-working professional writer, and he had some very interesting and maybe slightly peculiar attitudes towards language and poetry that people need to get to grips with if they want to appreciate him. And that's what I'm trying to do in this work. I'm saying, here we are, collected works of Dylan Thomas, the collected poems. I've put in different kinds of poems. It's not just the canonical ones from the 1988 edition. I put in different things such as verse, film, script, the poems from the letters, pub poems. There's a poem that actually was only discovered last year, which we put in here. I've even put in a prose poem. It's actually a short story, but it's very short, and it's so condensed that it's like a prose poem. There's a selection from the notebooks. We've got the verses and the songs from Undergut Wood as well. So it's a mixture. But what it's intended to do is to get you to come in and think, well, this poet is so fascinating, this work is so extraordinary, but I want to know what makes it tick. How can I take it apart and see what makes it tick? What is the mystery of Dylan Thomas's way with words? So that's what the collected poems is intended to do. At the end, it's the poems, but it's also notes. And you know, it may look a little bit boring, it may look a little bit academic, but there's nearly 200 pages of notes at the end. And what they're intended to do is, whichever poem you pick up on, however weird or complicated it seems, and some of the early poems are,
well, the
very,
poems, you know,
complicated.
to hear that those are in there, and with your annotations and your analysis, I think that's going to help people greatly, especially for those early poems, as you're saying, because I think a lot of people look at them and they're instantly put off, which is a great shame, because this is a poet learning about the world around him. He's an adolescent boy. You know, he's growing up. He's talking about the natural world around him, spiritual imagery, sexual imagery, all sorts of things.
He's linking the internal and the external world, and
absolutely.
that's really the key to these early poems, I think. But he also has a peculiar, maybe to most poets, attitude to language. He doesn't write towards words, as you pointed out. He writes from words. In other words, what gives Dylan Thomas a kick is the way that words sound and the way that they relate to each other as words. And if you think about this, you know, what do we use language for? 99% of the time, it's to convey my meanings, my thoughts, my feelings, and so on to another person. Yeah. And language is just used in an instrumental way. That's the way it's normally used. But Dylan Thomas trades on the paradox that actually language is a material. It's actually airwaves, it's marks on the paper, it's a thing. So it's a thing that actually talks about things, and that distinguishes it from everything else in the world, really. And we use it, you know, as a kind of transmission vehicle, but we forget that it's a thing sometimes. So he wants to make us realise that language is this material, in the same way that some painters make you understand that the paint is pigment, it's thick, it's there on the canvas, it's a material. Yeah, exactly. Or a sculpture. Yeah. You know, maybe even better analogy. So he wants us to look at language as a thing. And what he's doing in that early poetry, which, as you say, Matt, can be quite daunting, is he is making language that will jump out of off the page at us by using insistent rhythms, alliteration. He's getting a pulse in there, which is the pulse of the basic rhythms of life, you know, of walking, of the fetus in the womb, of sex, of fading and dying as well, of a conception and of death. And he's making poetry physical. And this is what's important. For him, the poem links the external and the internal universe, and it gives you language as a thing, as well as a communicative medium. So there's a lot going on there. You know? But once you've got these basic ideas, you can get into these poems and you can see what it's about. It's about first things and last things. He's about language. A lot of the poems are about the birth of poems. You know, that sounds paradoxical, it sounds maybe a bit boring, but that's what a lot of them are about. And Dylan Thomas makes that a brilliant and fascinating process.
Do you think that if you start reading some of Dylan Thomas's works, that you should break yourself in a certain way before you jump into like the more complex works that he'd done in the latter years?
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea, you know, and you wouldn't necessarily read from front to back in this book. That's a very good point. You know, you might want to start with something you already know, like Fern Hill, or In My Craft of Sullen Art, or, you know, And Death Shall No Dominion, or Do Not Go Gently Into That Good Night. And then you might see that some of the poems, you know, link to that. Right. Because I've organised the poems chronologically, unlike in the last edition, so you can see what he was writing at any one time and the order that he wrote the poems. And then you might want to branch out there and have a look at the poems that are around it, which are similar in theme and maybe in language, but maybe a little bit more difficult. And you would then expand your ability to deal with it. So, for example, something like And Death Shall Have No Dominion. You know, that is a fairly straightforward poem, it seems to be. But if you pushed on a little bit from that, and you came to poems that were written a few months later, this is into late summer, early autumn of 1933, you come to a poem like Before I Knocked and Flesh Let Enter. It's a bit more ambiguous, it's a bit stranger. But it's in the same world linguistically, and it's got the same pulsing rhythm, it's got the same kind of reiterations. And you could develop your reading ability within into that poem. And then, you know, step forward a little bit more, pick up another one, and expand your range of reading and understanding.
It's interesting you said about including some of the more prose poems in it, because when we have visitors here to the Birthplace, of course, we also get people that are just interested in learning a little bit more about it. They just introduce it, especially through this year, the Centenary year.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we always say is that don't be daunted by Dylan's poetry, but as you said, Rob, to maybe approach it from a different angle. He's not just a poet.
No.
He's a wonderful prose writer.
Yeah.
He didn't like writing prose, so we're told.
No.
But his stories are a great way into it. So, of course, the prose poems we read too could also open more doors.
Yeah.
Yeah, although this prose poem, I have to say, is one of the most difficult. and recounts all those things that he wrote. It's called In the Direction of the Beginning. And it's beautifully written, but it's very mysterious and opaque.
Yeah.
But yeah, prose things, what I would say about that is that he didn't just write poems which were lyric poems. He wrote poems which, for example, were film scripts. And this is something I've included, which hasn't been put in a collected poems before. There's a script for a film called Our Country, which is a versified script, and it was made into a film in 1943. And it follows the wanderings of a sailor who's been torpedoed and is looking for another ship, and it goes through all parts of Britain. It starts in Glasgow, and it goes to London, and then you're out of Dover, and it goes all around the Midlands and Wales, and eventually goes up to Scotland. And it's written in a fairly easygoing, prosy style. It goes something like this: going out over the racing rails in a grumble of London leaving thunder, over the maze track of metal, through a wink and a spin of towns and signals and fields, out to the edges of the explosive, the moon-wooed, man-indifferent capsizing sea. You know, it's poetic, it's poetry, but it's actually descriptive of particular places and of movement. And it's fairly close to descriptive prose. So you could begin with this if you wanted something that was about Britain in the Second World War, and is about a guy wandering around all the parts of Britain, well, Scotland and England anyway. And it takes in a girl who's been bombed in Sheffield, and it takes in the border landscapes of Scotland and England with their trees and their wastes, and it mentions the industrial areas of South Wales, and St Paul's Cathedral, places are named. Yeah, and that's
I suppose
something.
By doing that kind of thing, if you know those places or if you've seen them on TV or whatever, you can relate to it as well. Like if he's doing something about, say, St Paul's Cathedral and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, and you can get the social Dylan as well. You know, Dylan Thomas had a social conscience, not just a social conscience, but he was a socialist. And he was in his way a revolutionary poet too. When you read a poem like "The Course Through the Green Fields Drives the Flower," well, that's a poem that many people in the 30s took as a kind of anticipation of what was going to come in the Second World War. Yeah, bomb and gas attacks, and it's gothic and slightly morbid and repulsive aspects, like that of quite a few of the other early poems, was seen as a prefiguring of what was going to come. This poem, this little passage here, is from another film called Wales, Green Mountain, Black Mountain, and this is what he has to say. It's relevant today as it was in the 1930s. Remember the procession of the old young men from Dole Queue to Corner and back again, from the pinched, packed streets to the creak of slag, in the bite of the winters with shovel and bag, with a drooping fag and turned-up collar, stamping for the cold at the ill-lit corner, dragging through the squalor with their hearts like lead, staring at the hunger and the shut pit head, nothing in their pockets, nothing home to eat, lagging from the slag heap to the pinched, packed street. Remember the procession of the old young men. It shall never happen again.
Yeah.
Now that is a poem about depression. It's about the promise that was made in the war that would be full employment and would be a return to the Roaring 30s.
Like you said, it's timeless.
It's timeless.
You know, it occurs over and over.
Yeah, it's there for David Cameron, just as it was for the leaders of the national government in the 1930s. So there are different Dylans here, and there's serious Dylan, there's political Dylan, there's comic Dylan. because one of the things I had to do was go around the various archives, and there were a couple of big holdings in America that I did, the British Library. But one of the most interesting things I found was in the National Library of Wales at Aberystwyth. And this is material from a notebook kept by one of his girlfriends, Veronica Sibthorpe, who he was having an affair with just before he married Caitlin, as it happens. Veronica Sibthorpe had an artificial leg. She was quite a character.
You did these wonderful drawings for her as well, didn't you?
Yeah, these are from a scrapbook with all sorts of doodles in them. And just read a couple of these things out. There's one here called Poem to Veronica. Wherever there's honey, there's bees and bears there, and I'm a bad bee, and you're a good bee. And then there's another one called Sugars, which sums up quite a lot of his more serious poetry in a way. All I know about death can be said in one breath. It's tall and it's short, and it shouldn't halt. So, you know, you're getting this Dylan as well as the serious Dylan. And it's almost as though he's commenting on his own adolescent seriousness a few years before.
That's great. And of course, you also got the poems there from, I suppose, the period that's been called his second flowering. His third book, Deaths and Entrances, one of his biggest sellers. And I think the imagery in that, of course, just after the Second World War, and all of the things that he's seen go on, was he's been staying in London. He comes back to Newquay and the beautiful countryside, and you've got this wonderful mix of elements in that too.
Yeah, that's right. And this is the time when his childhood poetry starts. The poems about his own childhood, like Poem in October and Fern Hill, I suppose, is the most famous one. And there's a lot to be said about these poems, because it's not as though they're completely separate from the war poems. There's poems in Deaths and Entrances. If you read Poem in October carefully, and I don't want to spoil it for anyone at all, but you know, it is obviously a beautiful poem about remembering childhood. But it has, for example, lots of mentions of turning and burning, and he speaks about the dead child. You know, it's the child that's dead in memory. But it's also a reminder that there are poems in this collection, Deaths and Entrances, about actual dead children. You know, a refusal to mourn the death of a child in London. So that remembering of childhood, which makes his later poetry so appealing to so many of us, and the poetry of the Brits, it's bound together in this weird way. I think maybe what he's saying is that, you know, not only is my childhood dead, because obviously it's gone, but maybe the very idea of childhood has been killed by the war. You know, because such terrible things have happened. Atrocities have happened. Exactly. So it hopefully reveals the sophistication of the poems. I always think that Dylan's poems work at least two levels, and that he's not snobbish about either level. So, for example, if you want to come in at a more straightforward level, that's fine by him. He's not having a secret laugh at you because there are these initiates who understand the deeper level. He's saying that's one level, that's another level. They're not above and below each other, they're to the side of each other. So, for example, you know, you can read a poem like "And Death Shall Have No Dominion," and what does the title say it's about? It's about death not having any dominion. We will die, but we will be born again if we believe. You know, it comes over as a poem of the Christian faith, doesn't it? And it's his first great poem. It's a very important piece. But the point about that poem, I think, is that, again, if you read it carefully and you read the small print, as it were, what that poem actually says at the end is, though they be mad and dead as nails, heads of the characters hammer through daisies, breaking the sun till the sun breaks down, and death shall have no dominion. It's saying you will survive in a way that dead bodies pushing up the daisies survive. It's growing out of that cliche. He's pushing up the daisies, which just means that when you're dead, that's it, you're finished, and you will act as fertilizer for the plants above your grave. So on the one hand, the poem is saying you'll be born again in Christ, you'll rise, you know, just as you were in this life. The Christian promise is true. And on the other hand, it's telling what an atheist would tell you, which is basically you become molecules. You get recycled in various cycles of you know, the soil and vegetation and the universal cycles of creation and destruction. But you don't live again as an individual.
No.
What's interesting about the poem is it's saying both of those things simultaneously.
Yeah.
So there's a kind of cognitive dissonance we call it now going on. The ability of the brain to hold simultaneously two conflicting ideas.
Yeah.
And Dylan's very interested in that. And he does it over and over again.
He stitched it together so well, kind of thing.
It's saying two things at once.
Yeah.
He's interested in language being made to say two or three or four different things at the same time, and often completely contradictory ones. Because
it's almost like having two people.
you could relate it to his personality if you wanted.
Yeah.
I remember reading Cwmdonkin Drive, who's his first biographer, and he says at the end of the chapter, it's almost as though he's given up. He says, you know, when I began this biography of Dylan Thomas, I thought that the character I'd be writing about would have, you know, maybe two or three different sides to him. But the stories I've heard in putting this biography together relate not to two or three, but to 6 or 8 different people. So Dylan Thomas is a very multiplex and complicated character. He's not the buffoon or the drunkard legend, and he's not the inspired poet writing by singing lights either.
Yeah.
He's a whole range of different, constellation of different characters. With those two in there perhaps at certain points, but certainly not dominant. Those are just the ones that popular mythology latches onto.
I think that and death shall have no dominion. I think what's interesting about that, I believe that's around the same time where his aunt was dying of cancer at Fernhill, and he writes that incredible letter where he's basically saying, yes, she's dying, but he's basically saying that he doesn't really feel anything about the death. And it's interesting to see that poem in particular. And it is almost like you've got two different, and then of course he does After the Funeral.
Yeah, which is
so much into it.
Years later. I know the incident that you're describing. I think the letter where he writes about not being able to feel anything is from 1932. And Death Shall Have No Dominion's April 1933.
Yeah, that's right.
He's still a kind of adolescent, as you could say. And then with After the Funeral, he goes back to the rather juvenile poem he wrote for his aunt in 1952, and he does this in 1938, I think it was, 37, 38. And he writes this marvellous elegy, which basically makes it up to us. As you say, it's changed again. And he's written this lovely green elegy for his aunt, and for his own Charlotte as well.
It's wonderful. I think that those poems, as you say, Death Shall Have No Dominion, Do Not Go Gentle, an elegy. Do you think you can see a shift in his attitude then, obviously, towards death and his own mortality coming?
Yeah, I think as he gets a little bit older, and we always talk about these things relatively different. When we talk about, Dylan Thomas getting mature, we're talking about him being maybe 23, all of 24, and style shifts. He's still a fairly young man. He died after all. And some people talk about late Dylan Thomas. In fact, I've probably done it. But the point is that he matured very quickly, and he did change. So that kind of gothic, rather remorseless and slightly defeatist, deterministic attitude to death and the processes of the universe that come in the early poetry, that becomes more accepting. As he gets older, as his children, as he gets married, as it moves into the social world and the social scene. But the basic philosophy under his poems, behind his poems, it seems to me, always remains the same. And that is that we live in a world of complete process, a universal process. Everything is always changing. The only thing that's certain about the universe is that nothing is certain. Okay, so it's about lack of certainty, and it's about the kind of the style with which you can face up to that certainty of uncertainty. It seems very archaic, that but it's also very modern because it derives also from Einstein's view of the universe, and Darwin's view of biology, and Freud's view of the human mind. Maybe I could just read this short poem out, which he wrote when he was 24 years old, and just as he's changing his style, and it's called 24 Years. 24 years remind the tears of my eyes, bury the dead for fear that they walk to the grave in labour. In the groin of the natural doorway, I crouch like a tailor, sewing a shroud for a journey by the light of the meat-eating sun. Dressed to die, the sensual strut begun, with my red veins full of money, in the final direction of an elementary town, I advance for as long as forever is. And that's a poem really about the human condition. It's about being there, sewing a shroud for a journey. This is the child, crouched like a tailor, fetus in the womb, dressed to die. And he's taken that little idiot just to kill. It's for his own death. But there's a swagger there, there's a sensuality to it. The sensual strut begun with my red veins full of money. This is like, if you've ever been on the high street in Swansea, right at night, when all the lads and the lasses come down from the valleys and they're out of the trains and they're going to hit the pubs and the clubs and they're swaggering along and their red veins are full of money, the sensual strut has begun. This is what kicks life forward. You know, it's oomph, it's sex, it's glimmer, it's glamour and it's glitz and it's bling and so on. He likes a bit of that, and that's what drives the human animal forward. In the final direction of the elementary town, that's the elements we're going to go back to. But you know, it's also
it's like this was back then when he was 24, and nothing has changed.
No, I think you could read this looking at High Street on Friday night. That swagger, that energy, that youth, and you could say, this poem's about that. Right now, today as well. And we're all advancing for as long as forever is. Which is a bit like a shrug, you know, for as long as forever is, whatever it is.
So it's great. So I think if we talk about the book itself, how long has this taken? What's the process been like for you, John, in putting it all together?
Plenty of man hours, I should
well, it's hard to quantify actually that, because it's hard to know where it began. But I guess seriously, I began to sit down to do this about 2 years ago. I was given a research grant. I got time off from the university, so thanks to the Arts and Humanities Research Council and to the University of Swansea. And I sat in a fairly generous sized shed at the end of my garden, and I just started trawling through articles, lining up the poems, thinking about what I was going to include in it. There were glitches and there were problems. You know, the course of true love never runs smooth. And my relationship with this book is a kind of love affair. And you know, you're dealing with publishers, and you're dealing with agents, you're dealing with states, you're dealing with former editors. Dylan Thomas is very lucky in having had two fantastic earlier editors in Ralph Moore and Walford Davis. But I felt that something new needed to be done with the work, and that's what I set out to do. So my short answer to you would be 2 years, but it's felt more like 10 at times.
And there's been a heck of a lot of travel involved as well.
There has, over to America, as I said, twice, London, Aberystwyth. I think Aberystwyth felt further away than any of those. Swansea Library, the University Library, searching for things on interlibrary loans and so on. You know, and the book I wanted was a little bit bigger than this, I have to say as well, because when I got the notes and I collated them finally, and I sent them off, there were maybe 100 pages more than this. And the publisher said, at a rather late stage, I should say, John, you've got to cut X thousand words. And so in a couple of months, I had to spend every evening and every weekend hacking it back. So in the end, the notes felt a little bit like, you know, the game of Jenga, or wooden sticks and hoping the whole tower doesn't fall down. Hopefully it didn't fall down. Only the people who read it actually know whether it works for them, that apparatus. But there are now about 80,000 words of notes in there, which I think is pretty generous amount. And they take up about as much space as the poems, but I think Dylan Thomas deserves it.
Absolutely.
And as I say, it's been a labour of love, so whatever the heartache, I'm pretty pleased with the results. There are a few little glitches there, but I'll leave other people to find out.
And it's been published through Orion.
Yeah, that's right.
They've got a connection with Dylan Thomas as well, I believe.
Well, they own the publishers. Gent were Dylan Thomas's publishers from 1936 onwards. They were taken over by Weidenfeld and Nicholson, so the book appears under the imprint of Weidenfeld and Nicholson. Weidenfeld and Nicholson are owned by Orion,
Right.
and Orion may be owned by somebody even bigger.
Yeah.
This is the publishing world, you know. It's like Russian dolls. I feel as I've been dealing with all levels simultaneously.
Yeah.
It's a bit wearing sometimes. So it's publicity department, and it's an editing department, and there's a department that sets you up for various festivals and so on.
Yeah.
But we've got there, and the main thing is that it's out in time for the anniversary, and hopefully it will introduce people to Dylan in not too painful a way, and it will expand the understanding of Dylan that those who are already reading want. Yeah, that's the key. That's right.
Did you find there was quite a bit of a detective kind of aspect to gaining all the information that you needed?
Well, yeah, in a way, because he's a very, I wouldn't say secretive writer, he's a cunning writer.
Mm.
He's a bit of a young dog, you know.
Mm.
He likes playing tricks on his readers. So, for example, there's one poem in the books, and it begins with the line, brief, comma, thief of time, comma, falls off.
Mm.
That's fairly straightforward from us. What does Dylan do? He rewrites that for his second collection, and it becomes brief thief of time crawls up. No commas.
Right.
Now you try working out the syntax of that. He obviously wanted the challenge of trying to make a sentence like that, which isn't punctuated in any way, fit into the rest of the sentence of the stanza that makes up half of the poem. So he did that, but he had to twist syntax and grammar in order to do that, and he liked that particular challenge. So he will set himself obstacles, and that means the reader has to jump through loops as well to follow what he's doing.
Yeah.
He's basically testing language to the limits, pushing it to the limits, because it makes you think in new and different and strange ways. And sometimes he will allude to authors, he will refer to authors without you knowing. It may not even be necessary to understand the sense of the poem, but he's playing a little game. I'll give you one example.
So this is from a book that John brought out last year, I believe it was, called Under the Spelling Rule.
That's right. This is the critical kind of monograph that would go if you wanted to push it a little bit further with the collected poems. In some ways, I wish I'd done the collected poems before I wrote this, because once I'd done the collected poems, I knew all the things I didn't know when I wrote this one.
Right.
But you know, wisdom's great in hindsight, isn't it? Anyway, look, this is a little passage, a sentence from a novel called Nightwood by an American writer called Juna Barnes, published in 1938. We know it was one of Dylan's favourite prose books, one of his favourite novels, because he reviewed it.
Right.
And when he was trying to brush off stupid questions in the pubs, he was known to say occasionally to the question, well, where do you get your lines from, Dylan? He'd say, oh, I just flip through Nightwood, and if I can't think of anything, I flip through Nightwood and I take the top line of one page at random. And, he got rid of one idiot that way, maybe 3 or 4. But it seems like a joke. But I thought, well, I've got to read as much as I can that Dylan read. So I read the 17th century poets, we read people like John Donne, Thomas Browne, and Blake, and so on, all the poets we know that Dylan's always liked. And I thought, well, what if there was something in that little jibe? Because it's very much like Dylan to tell a joke which actually contains sense. And I found an echo of Nightwood in one of his poems. So this is the sentence. Night people do not bury their dead, but on the neck of you their beloved and waking, sling the creature, husked of its gestures. And where you go, it goes, the two of you, your living and her dead, but will not die, to daylight, to life, to grief, until both are carried. Okay, 2 sentences. Now this is the 5th stanza of Dylan Thomas's poem, If My Head Hurt a Hare's Foot. Now to awake, husked of gestures, and my joy like a cave, to the anguish and carrion, to the infant forever unfree, when my lost love bounced from through home. And there you have husk of gestures, he takes that phrase, and grief and carrion. And it's not necessary to understand the poem, but he's practicing a kind of sampling method, we call it now, in order, as it were, to kickstart his creative mojo.
Right.
And this is one of his best, most favourite books ever. And he's used that to get himself going. So echoes, subtle lifts like that, I've tried to track down. Quite a few of them. People think that Dylan Thomas was a quite intuitive writer. He didn't go to university. He liked to pretend that he didn't read that much sometimes, or only read Dickens, or only read thrillers. But he's incredibly well read. And he remembered a huge amount of what he read as well. And he buries it deep in poems. There's a sort of mulch, an intertextual sort of mulch of material in there, which, it could take you a lifetime to uncover. Potentially, the notes to this book could be 2,000 pages rather than 200. You have to draw a line somewhere.
Yeah. Well, there we are. That's wonderful. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you.
You said we'll have to draw a line somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. So, of course, we've got the collected poems, which comes out on October the 9th.
Yeah, it is for
£20, available from Orion, Amazon, and all other good bookshops, I suppose.
Could I just mention that this
You
one
can indeed.
has been revised and is coming out in paperback later this month as well, and it will be a reasonable price. I think this hardback costs about £75, but the paperback will be more in the £20 range.
Oh, yeah. That's great.
And we will put the links on
Of course we will.
whenever they come out.
Thanks.
No worries.
Well, thanks again, John. It's been great to
pleasure.
have you here tonight. We hope that you'll stick around and maybe answer a few questions that we'll hopefully get going into. I know that I've got a couple already lined up for you for later on. Okay. We've had a few early questions come in, so yeah, if you can stick around. Brilliant. Wonderful. There we go.
Very much.
Okay, guys, thank you.
What we'll do now, we'll get a person who you're very familiar with, Natalie. Of course, you've been supervising Natalie on her course that she's just finished a dissertation, and we'll get her in. And we met Natalie, of course. She's still here, by the way, folks. I'm not just talking to anybody. And Natalie will come in, and she'll be doing a few of the latest poems. Excellent. I know that she's been busy.
Yes.
So thank you very much, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We should go and get Natalie.
No worries.
So there we are, folks. Professor John Goodby, with that incredible undertaking of the complete poems, the collected poems, sorry, of Dylan Thomas. This is a brand new Centenary edition. A heck of a lot of work has gone into it, as you just heard. And we hope that you will go out. And in fact, I'm sure that most of you have pre-ordered it. I know I have. And I'm saved by the bell because Natalie's here. So welcome once again, our versifier in residence, Natalie Halbrook.
Do you have a glass of water?
I'm okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose the very first question, of course, now I know that not everybody tuned in to the last Poetshub meet that we had here. So if you just want to recap just a little bit about yourself, how long you've been doing poetry, and what the idea of the Birthplace versifier is.
Okay, I applied for this role because I saw that the Birthplace were looking for someone to get more creativity going here at the Dylan Thomas Birthplace. That could be poetry evenings, workshops, and mainly just to get poetry out to people who perhaps are a little apprehensive about it, who don't know what it's all about. And I was interested as well that it was a versifier in residence, not a poet, because I did wonder what that was, but it's because Dylan Thomas was a versifier.
Absolutely.
He wrote plays, he wrote poetry, and he wrote stories as well. So, I mean, I'd like people to come here and feel that they can contribute creatively in any way. I mean, even art and music. I know we get artists here showcasing their work. So, yeah.
Excellent. Well, of course, the last time you were here, you read a few bits of your work as well.
Yeah.
Have you been active? Have you been out on the scene again now, reading Any more new material? Or?
Now that my work is in, I can do a lot more of it. But yeah, I still go to
The
a lot.
dreaded dissertation is finally finished.
Yeah, I do still go to Howl when I can. It's encouraging as well that there are so many open mic nights going with poetry. We've had poets meetings here, which was really interesting actually, and there was such a variety of different poets.
If I just stop you one sec, that's the new Cwmdonkin Poets poetry meet that we're doing here at the end. I believe it's the last Wednesday of every month. And we had our very first sort of our inaugural meet a couple of weeks ago. And we had a turnout which was quite encouraging. We had a few new faces, which is what we want. So again, if you want to try and get involved with the Birthplace in that group, that's the last Wednesday of every month. Sorry, that's my advert done.
Yeah, that's your plug.
That was nice. We had I saw one or two of them were regulars at Howl, so I was quite used to the poetry that they read. But we had someone who was very into beat poetry and delivered it in Welsh and English as well, which I thought was just so impressive, and used all the old Welsh forms. I think it was so nice just to have that variety as well.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic.
Well, supposed to get all different kinds of forms and
you
know, introduce yourself to new stuff as well.
Yeah.
When you go there.
I wasn't that familiar with a lot of the Welsh forms, but the way he was explaining the rhythms and how musical it was as well. That was interesting.
This is exactly what we want. You know, this place is obviously it's so important for being the birthplace of Dylan Thomas, but it's always been a very creative house anyway. We want to keep that creative energy going, and there's nothing better for us than seeing new faces come. Obviously, learn about Dylan at the same time, but actually just come and read their own works and hear other people and bounce ideas off one another. It's vitally important, I think. Especially for a poet to get this honest critique as well. So that's what it's designed for the Cwmdonkin Poets. It's a very friendly atmosphere. We're here to listen, we're here to help and help encourage as well.
It's got to be pretty relaxed.
Absolutely.
You know, pretty like this.
Yeah, absolutely. The well-oiled machine.
Thanks. Well, there seem to be a lot more students interested in this sort of thing now, especially a lot of them decided to study English in Swansea because they're so interested in Dylan Thomas, particularly American students. So I think the Centenary as well, it's a great time to get into anything creative.
It's a hook, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
That's great. Well, the question on everyone's lips, do you have any new poems?
I've been writing new poems at the rate of, I don't even know, forcing them. But, yeah, I'll give you my first one, which is, it's called Victoria Terrace. Talking about students, I think everyone's lived in some sort of grotty house at some point. Mine wasn't so bad, but my sister's on the other hand.
Really?
I mean, they didn't have a shower for about 2 weeks, so
they're going to love you for saying
that. They all had to wash in the sink. It's horrible. Anyway, this one's called Victoria Terrace. Tap splutters and spits in the shared bathroom, too grey, bleachy Atlantic. She twists the handle, fizzing jets. Takes too long. Listen, root uproar, letters splashed over side tables, closed doors, towel rub, mould blooms green as a banknote. You are big now, sophisticated. Look at you, cracking dry spaghetti, thin wheaty bones over pans, sputtering gas and grease ring Michelin stars. Popping lids from jars, buggy mushrooms, bean slop. Eating well, Mum, eating well. Is this the dream then, this flaking, shuddering house, moth-brackled, damp-bottomed and senile? Something still beats in the scarred white walls, boot bruises, fractured doors unhinged. Breakfast eaten shyly in the wrong language, stiff in marijuana haze. Wrench open the skylight, intruding rain. Around her wet mangle of clothes, a housemate hums, a native tune perhaps, with Polish eyes lost in her head. With thin limbs in the early hours, stretch and lift, and there you are, with your ratty eye meeting her ice blues. Blue as the salty sea town, your freezing home.
Brilliant.
And how long did that put together? Did it take to put that one together?
This one wasn't that long because I mean I only had to go in there a couple of times and I'd already sort of written it in my head.
Yeah.
So that one didn't take too long.
Excellent.
It's proper student thing with like
Absolutely.
pot noodles and Monster Munch sandwiches
Yeah.
and cheap cider.
I don't think I ever did Monster Munch sandwiches.
Oops, that's just me. Oh, brilliant. Brilliant. Do you want to read another one tomorrow? Or?
Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
I was asked to read one. Is it Tom, I think, who runs the Richard Burton Museum
Yes,
page?
Yeah.
Tom.
He did put a
At
request
Burton
in.
Museum, his Twitter handle.
This one is a mix of it's extracts from Portrait of the Artist as a Young Dog from Dylan Thomas and Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce.
Yeah.
And then I took parts from it and mixed them up to
Excellent.
see
Oh, that's fun.
what it would bring. So this is Portrait of the Artist. They would be tittering together now, with their horrid bodies close, their arms and legs and throats as brown as berries. She, too, wants me to catch hold of her. I could hold her and kiss her, he thought, put her straight head, heavy head on my shoulder, brave enough at last to hold her cold hand in its glove. The lank brown horses knew it and shook their bells, anchored among the hulks of houses, and the snowman with a broken back collapsed. Her chest moved up and down. Her rough body, bottle legs, grew from a few words. Laughing from the shelter of the chapel into the darkness, this heretic, with his hand on her breast, opened his eyes with a nervous impulse, saw the town in a daze spin by them. There was never a young lover who didn't love the moon, he said, pecking each other like gulls in the air, dirty as Christ knows what.
Some great imagery in that one.
Yeah, you can just picture it in your head.
Well, that's super. I like the way, obviously, what you've done there with intertwining Dylan and Joyce too, because Joyce was a great hero of Dylan's. And of course, Portrait of the Artist as a Young Dog, taken from Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, James Joyce. So I really, really like that one. Yeah, it's excellent. We can only expect more from Natalie. She's got no excuses now to do her dissertation and getting that ready. So let that pen continue to flow on the page.
Yeah, definitely.
So, any more? Or?
I can read another one actually.
There we are. Wonderful.
Okay. I'm not very good with staying up late. I'm more a morning person, even though I don't respond, but try and talk to me at night, no.
I have noticed.
This one's called Night Shift. I have stooped with a dustpan and brush in the kitchen all night, pulled glittering shards of beer bottles, crooked stubs of John Player's blue, scattered like amputated fingers, done everything I can to stay awake. My mouth reeks of coffee, sticky black, glued to the bellies of jars, stained rings on windowsills, yesterday's paper. Knuckle smudged under my eyes. Drift to the toilet all night. Stretch, cook in gummy-eyed stupor, sit crooked at the table. I cry, still holding my mug, and forget to boil the kettle. My shadow moves from grey to mauve across the kitchen wall and turns the TV up. Smiling gorgeously in her crimson shirt, a newsreader tells me a foreign time, assures me that this is the world, and wishes me good morning in the dead of night.
Great.
It's brilliant. I love that.
Awesome. That's wonderful. Thank you ever so much for debuting them at the Birthplace. And I suppose as well with the versifier role, how can people actually get hold of you? I know that you'll be sending people challenges on Twitter and things like that.
I do have a versifier page, but I have a Twitter as well. If you go to versifier at Dylan Thomas Birthplace on Facebook, there's a link on there at the moment for a competition I want to run. If anyone wants to try their hand at playwriting, they don't have to have done any playwriting before, just if they want to have a go at it. We're looking for a Swansea version of Shakespeare.
Right.
So if you can
That should be interesting.
if you can write the next Merchant of Mayhill, I think you could turn Romeo and Juliet into something completely different. I mean, go for it.
Excellent. Well, that sounds great.
And we know, additionally, you've just written a blog post for Poetshub, which will be going up tomorrow.
For National Poetry Day.
Yeah. Do you want to give somebody a bit of what the gist of it is?
Yeah. It's just an introduction to poetry. A lot of people ask me about it, or they say, why are you so interested in poetry? Or they're under a lot of misconceptions because of the way it was taught in school. I mean, I'll admit myself, I didn't enjoy it in school until we came to Seamus Heaney and Dylan Thomas when I got into poetry. But yeah, it's about why you should get into it, why it's so important to us now, and why what poetry is.
Right.
Yeah. Ways you can get into it.
And that will be up tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Brilliant, hopefully.
Yes.
That's brilliant. Well, that's great. Thank you very much, Natalie, once again for coming along. And I think now it's time for another new face.
Right.
For Poetshub.
Yeah.
Tim Hart. So if you wouldn't mind, somebody grabbing Tim.
I'll go and get him now.
And
I think, is Jeff in on this one as well?
I believe the owner of the Birthplace, Jeff Hayden, will also be joining Tim, because Tim has got a poem that he'd like to read, which does require two voices. So bear with us, whilst Jeff Hayden helps deliver this poem with his dulcet tones. I'm sure he hasn't been stressing about it in the green room since we've been on air here. And I'm sure he'll come across very, very well. So we'll await those. Again, thank you very much for tuning in tonight. We've had wonderful comments from Professor John Goodby. Wonderful to have a new face in Steve Garrett coming here also. And please send these questions in to us as well, folks. You can find us on Twitter, Dylan Thomas Home, and on Facebook, facebook.com/Dylan Thomas Birthplace. We're joined now by a brand new face to the Birthplace, Tim Hart. So welcome, Tim.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope you've been enjoying yourself in our green room.
We have, yes.
The wonderful surroundings of the study.
Yes.
And of course, I'm perched on the arm of the chair here. For those of you that tuned in last time round, of course, you met the owner of the Birthplace, Jeff Hayden, who was responsible for basically saving this wonderful house and doing the renovation work on it and opening it up to the public properly. So we've got Jeff with us as well. But first of all, Tim, I think we'll just ask you a few questions like we did with Steve, just to ask you how you found your way into poetry.
Yes, well, I mean, I wouldn't claim to be a poet. I occasionally write poetry. And it was just accident, really. I sat down and occasionally thought about ideas and thought that poetry would be, in some cases, the right vehicle for me.
Yeah. So again, then, was that the case as well, of maybe going along to having some pints or an open mic?
No, I mean, it was more meeting individuals, actually.
Right.
I mean, in fact, Mark, who will be on later, was one of the people that inspired me to write one or two poems.
Stage name, S.J. Alexanderson.
That's right, yes, that's right. Yeah, so it was really individuals.
Oh, great. And how long have you been doing it for now? How long have you been writing?
I mean, I first started writing for a newspaper. I was a journalist on the Isle of Man, and then from there I started writing fiction. I wrote radio stories, short stories, and more lately I've written a few poems.
Great. Well, and of course I will ask Jeff as well, how long have you been reciting?
This is a very new thing for me. I'm Tim's frontman, I suppose, and I'm just going to perform a little poem with him. And it's very new to me, but it's not actually reciting.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
Well, you've surprised us then. Wonderful. Well, that's great. Okay, and is this? Do you have any more pieces that you'll be performing as well tonight?
I could do. I've got a memory stick with me, so just by accident, I've got, I've got other bits.
A USB slot. In the
yeah, that's right. So I could plug that in, and if I'd be able to get it on screen or print it,
no problem.
then I could do. Yeah.
I can sort that out for you later on. Yeah, that's not a problem at all. That's brilliant. Okay, so you say that you know people like SJ. Any other poets now that you're in pretty good contact with?
No, I mean, I must confess that I don't do a lot of reading.
All right.
Poetry or books, which is a bit of an anathema really for a writer. But it's never been something that physically I found very easy to do.
Right.
It tends to, I tend to find it difficult to read the words. No, I don't do much reading. So it's writing.
Excellent, excellent. Oh, that's superb. And again, are you still involved with radio broadcasting or anything?
No, I mean, that was a few years ago, when there were a lot more local radio stations. Local in the sense that they were run by the community.
Right. Yeah.
In the last 10 years, they've been taken over by major corporations. And so whilst they claim to be local, they're run by corporations in America or Ireland, and some of them own hundreds of radio stations.
Right.
So when you tune into local radio, you get the same formulaic response in terms of music and commentary, and occasionally you'll get a community slot, just to fulfil their licensing requirements.
Right.
Yeah.
So with your work now as well, and the more sort of poetic elements, does that sort of echo your work previously with radio broadcasting? Are there similarities or?
Well, I mean, in the sense it's all fiction, so. Yeah, but the
structure or
the start, radio short stories were very disciplined in the sense they were 15 minutes, 2,500 words. Yeah. Some of them were sliced into 3-minute episodes, so it was a very structured and disciplined style of writing. Whereas poetry is much freer.
Yeah,
much more unstructured, much more liberal and spontaneously created, really.
I think perhaps that's one of the reasons why Dylan saw himself first and foremost as a poet, and he liked that freedom, and why he sort of didn't really enjoy them or his prose writing and such. Which is incredible because his stories are wonderful as well, and his radio broadcasts too, of course. You sometimes forget about his radio broadcasts. A huge name on the BBC during the
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm an expert on Dylan Thomas, but I think you're right. I think it was an anarchic approach, a very rebellious approach. Although, as you say, it did conventional stuff for the BBC, quite a lot of propaganda for the BBC.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's wonderful. So I guess we should hear this piece that you've been practicing in the green room, I guess.
Yes, I mean, this is a poem with narrative.
Right.
So I'm going to read the poem part of it.
Right.
And Jeff very kindly is going to read the narrative. It's an anti-war poem. It was actually written for the Swansea Writers Circle, who are publishing an anthology this autumn. And I wrote it along with a short story. So I submitted 2 pieces. The short story was rejected. Well, not rejected. It was I was asked to change the ending of it because it was considered pornographic. And I decided in the end that I wouldn't change the ending because I think the censorship aspect of that was actually censoring its anti-war message rather than the graphic sexual material in the ending. And they requested the poem in, but I decided to withdraw that as well. So that's this poem.
Calm down, Jeff.
Yeah, there's not much graphic sex in this song. Okay.
Not on my part, though, isn't it?
No, not really on my part. Sorry, let me just get my glasses. Let's see this. Okay. This is called Home. I love your lips.
The barrage of artillery fell silent.
The way they tease, the way they pout, the way they sparkle.
Stop the bloody mumbling and look lively, soldier. The sergeant's voice barked in my ear. We're going over the top in 5 minutes. I breathed deeply, sucking in the putrid stench of rotting corpses mixed with the acrid smell of cordite.
The way you bite them between your teeth, the way you fold them in your mouth and let them roll out again.
I felt my boots sinking in the rat-infested quagmire of black mud and yellow slime. As I pulled one foot out, the other sank deeper. The movement rubbed the raw blisters on my feet and sent agonizing shafts of pain up my legs.
The way they burst into life, when you smile and when you laugh.
Fix bayonets! The sergeant's voice reverberated around the trench, competing with the rasping sound of metal on metal and the murmuring of the men, creating a haunting symphony of terror.
Their perfect plumpness, their clear lush contours, silhouetted against your silky white skin.
The freezing rain lashed my face and mingled with the sweat streaming from under my tin hat. I let the salty cocktail dribble into my parched mouth.
The way they glisten in the sunlight, their warm, moist softness, as I swished my tongue over them.
2 minutes, yelled the sergeant. Nearby, one of the lads let out a piercing scream. I heard a sharp whack as the butt of someone's rifle quickly silenced him.
The way they move, so gracefully, so lovingly, when you sing to me.
I heard the crack of a rifle shot, followed by a dull thud. Another sniper's bullet had found its target. I felt the trickle of warm piss down my leg. I watched, and it gradually soaked through my filthy, lice-ridden trousers.
And when I touch them, they delicately respond. They gently invite me in.
The whistle blew. I dragged my feet from the mud and hurled myself up and out of the trench. A cacophony of thunderous machine gun fire, mingled with the screams of the men, signalled the commencement of the slaughter.
And when I feel them, I can feel all of you. They tell me everything about you.
I felt a heavy blow on my stomach, which spun me around and hurled me to the ground. I lay face down in the mud. I watched the blood spurting from my wound.
And when I can once again press my lips against yours, I will know that I am home.
It's really powerful. An incredible piece, this, Theo, I must say. And of course, very, very poignant with it also being the centenary of the Great War. Now, that wasn't written this year, though, was it? This was.
Yes, no, it was. It was written a few weeks ago, yeah, and it was particularly for the anthology of the Swansea's Writers Circle was for the commemorating the First World War.
Wow, that's an incredible piece for it to be featured. And, you know.
Yeah.
I think what I found about it is that I found out today about the death of my mother's brother in the First World War. And that brought this brought home that death, that he died in part of the Battle of the Somme in 1916, or he died 6 weeks after, and he came back to this country and then died. And on Friday, a commemorative cross has been placed around the town of London to him. That they are in the town of London placing over 800,000 ceramic crosses to the memory of the men who died in the First World War.
Incredible, absolutely incredible. And of course, the people, as you say, that this fictionalized account, of course, these people that were out there in Belgium and France and obviously fighting, these are the people responsible for really helping to give birth to people like Dylan Thomas and the poets in the 20th century. You know? These are the people that fought for our creativity. We can't forget that. You know, amongst everything that we see going on for Dylan's Centenary, we still have to remember the bigger picture too, with the Great War Centenary. So that's an incredible piece, Steve. Tim, sorry, I should say. I'm so glad you debuted here tonight on the Poetshub too.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. So there we are. That's great. Thank you very much for coming in. And I shall sort your memory stick out later on. And we can have a few more pieces from it.
Thanks very much.
Excellent. Well, that's great. So thank you very much to Tim. And
thanks very much.
Jeff, if you would be so kind as to bring Barbara
I will read
in as well.
Yep.
We shall have a chat with Barbara, another new face for the Dylan Thomas Birthplace. So that's great. I'm quite blown away by that piece, actually. As I say, it's very poignant to think of these men and of course women who were serving too.
Thank you.
Helping to give birth to the creativity.
Yes, thank you.
Welcome. So here we are. Come and take a seat. You finally get a chance to be on the Poetshub broadcast from Dylan Thomas Birthplace.
Lovely, absolutely. I'm flabbergasted. Thank you.
Well, that's great. So if you just tell us basically whereabouts you're from, because of course you don't have a Swansea accent or anything like that. I'm okay, thank you.
No, I have a mix of a German accent with whatever people I came across. I am German. I work in Belgium, and I'm here on my sabbatical.
Right.
For a few months, for a year actually. Not just here, but in England, and the purpose is to learn about creative writing.
Right. Okay. So you've been hitting the scene now with all these different creative groups.
Yeah, I can't believe this happening to me. So I'm really lucky. I'm very, very happy with it.
So first of all, I will say then in this case, are you a big Dylan Thomas?
Actually, my daughter gave me a book about 2 years ago that she's done in school.
Right.
Dylan Thomas in the Milkwood.
Oh, I'm the Milkwood.
And I've been sort of pushing it backwards and forwards on the shelf, and I've never done anything with it. And then when I came here, I accidentally got into a crowd that was really Dylan Thomas film. And so I started looking into it, and just this year, it being the Dylan Thomas year and all, and meeting a friend from Swansea who says, why don't you come? So it all the puzzle pieces sort of ended here, and now I'm on this sofa. So it is really, it's perfect.
Well, now is the time to learn more, obviously, with the big year that's going on too. And of course, the birthday is just a couple of weeks away on the 27th.
The real one, although the events have been going.
Absolutely. So fantastic. Hopefully, we'll get you hooked tonight.
I am. Yes.
Well, you could come on No Better Night as well with having Professor John Goodby come with a collection of poems as well. So there's that to go away and pre-order and buy on the night of October 2. But anyway, that's John, and this is you. So Barbara, again, as I've been asking a lot of our new faces tonight, how did you find your way into poetry?
Have I?
Oh, have you? Right, okay.
I'm not sure about this. So my idea about this is just learning about creative writing.
Right.
And I've done a couple of courses in England, and I am doing a couple of courses here. And I haven't really decided if it is poetry as such, or is it short story, or is it even bigger than that? I don't know yet. So I'm really feeling myself into it and trying lots of things and meeting people that sort of take me that way or this way, and
So it's still quite fluid then.
Yes, it is.
So gaining experience.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, it's sure that you have quite a few people in the study tonight now, which will prove
Lucky.
very beneficial. And,
Exactly.
That's what it's about. As I say, it's about meeting, other creatives, gaining those contacts, and going along to nights like tonight with boys and bikes, and feeling your way into it as well. As you say, you may decide that the poetry isn't really for you. You want to go down more creative writing, the prose work. The world is your oyster, sir. Excellent.
Swansea is my oyster mouth.
I mean, this thing that we do the first Wednesday of every month isn't just about poetry.
No,
we do have short stories and
other
forms of creative
hoping
writing.
to get musicians in as well. Maybe even artists, visual artists too, that can come in, photographers can showcase work. All sorts of things. So if you do want to get involved, folks, as I say, just send us an email. You can send it to myself, matt@DylanThomasBirthplace.com as well. But getting back to Barbara. So growing up, you grew up in Germany?
Yes, I am from Cologne. I lived most of my life in Cologne. Yes.
And are you from a creative background as well, your family?
No. I'm not.
So you're going to break the mold?
Actually, my father, my grandfather used to play the tuba.
Right.
Is that what you say with the Salvation Army? This is all I know about sort of creative way.
Well, you were sat in the study there on a Wednesday night. One of Dylan's creative friends was a chap called Tom Warner, and he played the French horn. So on a night like tonight, you could have heard the French horn.
Like that.
So brilliant. Okay, so basically, it is really a fresh leap into creative. Wonderful.
Yeah, I've done a script writing course in Berlin a few years ago, and I must say the German approach was not so much the one that I could get attached to totally.
So you've noticed a difference already?
Absolutely. Oh yes, and I purposely chose to do it on an Anglo background.
Really?
Yeah, it is just different because you have all these different type of people, and they don't push themselves so much in front, being so arty. So that they're not the artists first. That they have products and they try and they do things and maybe art comes out. So I prefer this approach.
And so what are we going to read today? What have you prepared for us? If you prepared.
Actually, I'm not really sure if this is a good... Okay, let's put it that way. This being Dylan Thomas Heist, and one of the exercises that I did was learning to write a villanelle.
Oh, right. Okay. Well,
and so that screams...
Perhaps the most famous villanelle of Dylan's
and based on this idea, or based on the villanelle idea, I have this little one, and it's called The Fork.
Wonderful.
If you arrive at the fork of your road, confusion sets in. You think you went wrong. Enjoy the new way without the old load. You were used to the sound of the old, but now is the time to learn a new song if you arrive at the fork of your road. You took things for granted and on you strode. The net that you wet was ever so strong. Enjoy the new way without the old load. You've set in warm water like an old toad. With the heat rising, you cannot prolong. If you arrive at the fork of your road. If you appreciate the given, that was your code. You've lost your spark, feeling safe for so long. Enjoy the new way without the old load. It frightens to stop protecting your mode, but it's good to feel lost and not so strong. When you arrive at the fork of your road, enjoy the new way without the old load.
That's excellent. And I think that goes for everyone.
Really,
that is universal. But to me, that sounds pretty personal too.
And it is one of the sort of the ways to I do my sabbatical, which I'm doing at the moment, and I decided for the sabbatical.
So you came to the fore.
Yes, I came to the fork, and am I just going to go on, or will I try something?
That's brilliant. Wow, that's superb. Nothing to be worried about with reading that piece out.
Thank you.
Is there any more? Or?
I'm thinking maybe there's it's a very sort of UK thing came into my head.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
The way you like your
You're not going to generalize this now.
No, I won't generalize. I will put it that way. It's there's more mint eaten here than there is in Germany, I would say.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is sort of gave me a funny idea. The traffic is slow. I look at myself in the rear mirror. The pleasant May sun reflects my face. I'm a pleasant man. That's what people say anyway. Pleasant. Pleasant? What is that? Does it make me pleasant that I'm over 50, that I wear nice clean shirts, polished shoes, that I have a 9-to-5 job, that I don't smoke, go to the hairdresser every 5 to 6 weeks? Does it make me feel pleasant that I kept my wife's cat after she died in May 5 years ago? Minty. She called her Minty. What a name for a cat. I renamed her to Secret after. The wife, my wife, wifey, Wiffy. Oh God, she loved her mint. She had mint plants growing in the garden. She made mint tea. She dipped mint biscuits into her cuppa. She sucked boiled mint sweets. We liked going to the restaurant around the corner. She wearing her favorite mint colored blouse. She ordering roasted lamb with mint sauce and finishing her meal off with after dinner mints. These are pleasant memories. Do I find mint pleasant? Well, at first I find it fresh and pleasant, then smelling, then foul, then rotten, sickening. No, not pleasant. I am a pleasant person. Pleasant don't want sick. Ah, there she is. Great. Always on time she is. Always right time, right place. Hello, my dear. Darling, get in, quick, I can't stand here. How was your day? Hi, love. Thanks for picking me up. You look tired. Let's get home. Pleasant that I'm going out with Heather. It's a good while now. I must say that I really like her. She suits me fine, makes me laugh, leaves me alone, gives me time to contemplate. She's good company. Come, as in with, can. Oh yes, she's great. She's a great cook. Company. Good with money, yes. For a moment, she's even pined and pennywise. Moving in with her was a good move. I want to keep it like that forever. Yes, I love you. I love you too. Yes, keep it like this. Of course, we all have our little secret. One just has to make sure it stays where it belongs and doesn't show up. The more grass grows over it, the better. And weeds. Let it all grow. Wild herbs, nettles, wildflowers, jack by the head, lords and ladies, even mint, goosegrass, cod parsley, hairy bittercress, convolvulus. Let it all grow and turn into soil year after year. Again and again, new herbs, new weeds, new grass grow to turn into soil again year after year. Pleasant that is. I am pleasant. Heather is pleasant. My life is pleasant. It is pleasant the way the grass grows. A lucky man I am, here with her beside me. She's speaking with her pleasant voice. Will we take the country lane, love? You mean to get away from the traffic? Do you know what it is? An accident? Don't think so. Just the time of the day everybody wants to get home. Have you read the paper today? Just flicked through. Why? Did you see that bit about the woman who found that body dug up in her garden? Imagine that, finding somebody's bones in your own garden. I'm pondering my reply. A pleasant one it's got to be. And her pleasant voice murmurs, sweetie? A pleasant distraction. I'm taking the sweet she has unwrapped for me. By the way, that makes me think, let's dig up that bit at the far end by the bench. It's lovely and sunny there. Good for herbs. I want to plant some mint plants and other stuff. I hastily put the sweet into my mouth. Oh God, not pleasant at all. Darling, watch. Go slow. The sweet, a strange and yet well-known sensation echoes through my body, slowly takes over the horrible, disgusting taste in every pore of my mouth. I open my lips and the stench coming out of my mouth hits my nostrils. I tense up more and more. I cannot move. I stiffen up from somewhere inside. The taste tears fragmented pictures out of every corner in my head, pictures that flash and race between my tongue, my ears, my nose, the roots of my hair, pictures of mint leaves, the corner in the garden, the turquoise pillow, the bulging eyes, the mint flies. That's all I can see. Darling, are you listening? Will we dig up that wee plot when we get back? I can hardly hear her. My ears strum, my heart throbs. No, the grass has to grow, screams a voice inside me. Are you okay? You're terrible, my love. Her slightly irritated but still pleasant voice reaches into my ears. Let's have a quiet night tonight. We'll do the garden some other time. Thank God, my breathing, my vision, my awareness start flowing back. Beep, beep. I wave at the driver behind me and smile, a pleasant smile at heaven.
I love that.
Oh, that's great. I'm so glad you've come to this fall.
Nice way, thank you.
Because that's wonderful. And as I say, I hope that you keep up with it as well. And,
Thank you.
As I say, you will draw off so many people here tonight. Yeah. But obviously, if you keep going to the open mics and things like that, you're going to pick up so many ideas, and I think that was wonderful. So
and the way it was read, it looks like you're picking up on the feeling.
That's good to hear, because I don't know. This is the bit that I simply don't know.
Yeah, well, but I feel, I'm sure Matthew.
I think what you've got the energy to put it across as well, which is really, it really did come across.
Thanks. Okay.
So thank you very much for coming in, Barbara, and thank you for visiting this wonderful house. And hopefully, if it's not too late by the time we finish, we can show you around a bit better.
Yeah, we'd like that.
Excellent. There we are.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much. Welcome. If you'd like any more water, there's more.
I'll take it.
Yeah. So I think the next and the final person tonight is a gent that we've seen before here at Dylan's Birthplace. S.J. Alexanderson, and a man that's really sort of going around on the poetry scene and is really getting his work out there. And he's been pretty prolific, really, I suppose, with his work. As he comes through the door now. Would you like a drink of water? S.J.
Yes,
Alexanderson.
Hello, Matthew.
How are we, sir?
Nice
to see you again.
You too.
Take a seat.
Thank you very much.
So you've been back in the study there, watching along to everything that's been going on tonight.
Thank you, Robbie.
Knowing you're the very last person out. So how do you follow all of that? Because I think we've seen some brilliant.
Oh, it's been fantastic tonight. It really has. It seems to be developing into quite a cultural event. Yeah. I thought perhaps I was on last because of the watershed moments, especially after last month's display. But it's going to be hard to follow it. But I mean, I don't think many people write the sort of stuff that I like to write about and like to perform. Very much real, hard-edged, dirty living, as it were. Life isn't easy. And I think a lot of that comes out in certain aspects of my poetry, Although, you know, in all honesty, I do write about other things like global warming. I'm very passionate about things, and I like to write about things that I'm passionate about. And I think that sort of shines through in my work.
Definitely. So, I can't remember how many pieces you read last time. But the question is,
5.
how many more have you wrote since?
Well, I wrote one yesterday specifically with tonight in mind, and it's quite a hard-edged piece. I've probably written a dozen pieces since then, but I mean, I've been out performing in several places in between last month and tonight. And I've tried a lot of new pieces out, and they've gone down generally very well. But obviously, I have to be aware of the type of audience that I have, and then go from there, decide what I'm going to read, decide what's going to be appreciated, or what's going to get me kicked out the back door. The bouncers.
Well, I think we're lucky, really, the people who are tuning in are obviously genuine culture vultures, as Dylan said. And, of course, poetry has many different forms of expression.
Absolutely.
Language that's used in it as well. But if you are a little bit squeamish, you may come across a few words in essays and poetry which you may not like, I suppose. So there's a little advance warning anyway.
Yeah, I think I'll limit that to the last one.
There we are.
I think I'll only do one tonight, and it'll probably be the last one. My new piece. It is very hard hitting, and I like it because it's real life, and it is semi-autobiographical, which will give people an insight into what makes me tick and what actually motivates me to write, and why I write the way I do and about the themes I write. So that will become apparent later on. But I've got several pieces that I want to try out tonight. Forgive me if I did them last time, but in all honesty, I can't remember all the ones I did. I think I did 5 last time. And so far I've gone through some of my books, and there's about 8 or 9 that I've identified that I might have done last time.
Well, of course.
So if I did it last month, I'm sorry. If you're watching again.
We've got lots of new viewers tonight as well. Yeah. So to be honest with me, it doesn't really make a difference because you'll hear them again.
And if you follow me on Twitter, you'll have a guide to my SoundCloud site or my Poetry Zoo site, where you'll be able to access some of my work anyway. On Twitter, I'm at SJ Alexanderson. As far as Facebook goes, sometimes you can catch me there. But my persona there is Arthur Pineapple, and I suggest don't ask. I know it's a silly name, but I was thinking of changing it.
Could be in the hair.
Yeah, could be. I was thinking of changing it perhaps to Derek Pineapple. I mean, that sounds more sensible. So, there we go. What I'm thinking about at the moment.
So, SJ/Arthur, you're ready.
Right, I'll start with one tonight, which has been taken on board by the Open University. It's a prison poem. It's a piece I wrote, actually, whilst I was in prison, and it's used a lot with young offenders and with people on remand to try and deter them with the authenticity of the piece into pursuing a life of crime. And if it can just sort of make one person stop and think before going on to become a career criminal or commit another offence, at least there'll be one less victim, direct victim, and countless indirect victims. So the piece is written with that in mind, to deter people from pursuing a life of crime. And I'm really chuffed that the Open University have taken it on board and are making it part of their degree course. Great kudos. No money, unfortunately, but great kudos. The piece is actually called Prison, Don't Do It. It's a dark, dark place with a brotherhood chill. The lonely, the sad, and the mentally ill. The down and the outs and the plain, plain bad, where they all miss their loves and the lives that they had. Cold, cold steel for the cold, cold boys. Feng shui lives are bereft of joys. Your friends all around, yet you're always alone, except for your letters and time on the phone. Existence is ours, but life it is lost. There are bars on the window that glisten with frost. The razor wire shines in the cold winter sun, and you know in your heart that your summer won't come. Suicide, self-harm, mind mutilation, constant the sorrow and humiliation, the smile on the outside, the grimace within, the time to reflect on your personal sin. It's queuing for this and it's queuing for that, where violence erupts at the drop of a hat. Bells run your life, not a clock anymore, because now you reside in this fucking eyesore. No game station here, no mobile, no dough, no life on the brown, no hooch and no blow. A meagre existence bereft of such pleasure, intelligent talk, it's rare, it is treasure. There's wheeling and dealing, the market is rife, and some people carry a blade or a knife. Death stalks the corridors, stench fills the air. Who told you that justice was proper and fair? In this land of constant twilight, we walk the eggshell floor. You're locked up with a killer behind a cold steel door. You sleep with one eye open and pray that when you wake, you're still alive and breathing, and your soul he did not take. So, sing a song of suicide and wish your life away. Welcome to the ranks of the boys in blue and grey. Come and join the brotherhood. Come here if you dare. There's room for fucking idiots down in our lair. I forgot about the swear words. Sorry about that, folks.
That's okay. No.
Hope I haven't trodden anyone's senses too much.
Well, I'm sure that people can appreciate, obviously, the meaning behind it. And it does, I think, obviously, it deserves every now and again a hard-hitting use of language. Obviously, it's a very powerful.
Thank you very much.
Piece that you've done there.
It's a relevant piece, and it speaks in languages that are understood by everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether they're in prison, whether they're educationally challenged, or in fact highly educated. Mm-hmm. Sometimes use of language to stress a point or to give realism to a piece can be very effective.
It's that very base nature, and of course it's what you find in prison.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a very base society.
Taking it down to grassroots, something, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But well, hopefully that should deter quite a few people.
Well, I hope so. That was the idea of the piece.
Yeah.
The second piece I've got, I love writing about global warming. Having got 9 children of my own, 8 sons and a beautiful daughter, obviously the future of our world, the world we're going to hand over to our children, is of huge importance to me. This piece is called Tawi Nymph. And I'll let the listeners and my fellow artists judge for themselves what they think of this. Tawi Nymph. Midstream, on rock, neath Nantgaredig Bridge, you sit and bowed in flowing linen white. Flame-haired, pale-skinned, into the summer wind you look through misty knowing eyes. Vision for the visionaries. So pure your love exudes your every pore, for all around and downwards to the core. Show me the truth, how we the poor uncouth may pass the test of time like you, O goddess of the natural realm. Our worlds have crossed in momentary lapse. Time shifts, same place, yet centuries apart. A pair of souls, we both pursue our goals to purge the earth of damned impurities. Give power to the powerless. Your world, my world, a universe divides. I'm blessed with faith, your presence so inspires. Please lead me on before mankind is gone to dust and buried with the dinosaurs. Give knowledge to the ignorant. Please show me through your telepathic thoughts how man can live beyond his destiny. For though we kill our mother, there's a will we have to fight for those so dear to us. Enlighten the enlightened ones. You see me there and stand to take your leave and smile with lips that never have been kissed. You look divine. A woman as sublime as you may change the course of history. Give passion to the passionate. Off to your home deep down within the earth, my water nymph, swim with the current strong. You give me hope the downward slope we tread can stabilize and be repaired, sustain the unsustainable. No words we spoke on that far summer's day, yet blessed was I to see such miracle. I will convey that there is still a way to go to pluck this planet from demise, that we may cheat an early grave and live beyond our years.
Good stuff.
Thank you.
Very
And
nice.
again, very much a hot potato.
Absolutely.
Global warming.
Yeah. It's very topical.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's something that we should all think about as well.
Yeah.
As you say, it's not just about our lifetime.
No,
that's-
what we leave behind.
We will have
That's
to
right.
hand over it at some point, and what do we leave behind us?
Yeah.
It's quite a scary
It's too
thought,
late.
really.
It's too late for regrets when the damage is already done.
Yeah,
We have to be conscious of what we're doing to our planet. And it breaks my heart to think that governments deny the existence of global warming. And
It's hard.
yeah, it's certainly apparent every day. I mean, look at the summer we've had here in Swansea.
Yeah.
The lack of rain.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually went to a quiz a while back, and one of the questions was, what is the wettest city in the UK? And I was shocked. It's Swansea.
Yeah.
And I go, yeah, that's proven.
Oops.
Right.
Here we go. This is my latest piece, and I wrote this one specifically with tonight in mind.
You may have to excuse me, Jess, because what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to go and check my laptop in the room, see what questions we've had come in for you all tonight. Because of course, after SJ, we're going to bring everybody back into the room to answer some questions. Hopefully, we've got some questions. So it's good. And send us some questions in.
If not, we'll mix them up.
Yeah, we can make. But then it will just turn into an open mic session.
Yeah.
Anyway, for people to recite the words. So you have to excuse me.
It's a shame because I thought you might like this one, but there we go. I'll send it to you in an email, Matt.
I'll catch the rerun of this Poetshub.
Right, here we go. I'll give a slight introduction to this new piece. What it is, I wanted to write a piece that highlights some of the complex issues faced in relationships in modern society, especially when children are involved and how they perceive third-party parents and parenting. I wanted to explore the deep implications that these new relationships have on all involved, both physically and emotionally, particularly when they don't unfold as planned from the point of view of new love through to the ultimate heartbreak of yet another emotional failure. This piece is powerful and emotive, but there again, so is life. Excuse me while I have a drink. The piece is called TikTok. Trauma and tragedy, bedfellows grim, illness and ailments, personal sin. What's to become of my young when I die? Will they mourn for my loss with a tear in their eye? Emotional holocausts, sexual desires. Egos still smoulder due to the fires that rage deep within, inside primeval soul, blacker than blackest, anthracite coal. Shot to oblivion, shot through the heart, yet no sign of blood, at least at the start, caught in the crossfire, tumbling down. Forgive me, my children, son, here, have my crown. I tried, Lord, I tried to be good through my life, yet I bled from those wounds that she cut with a knife. That weapon of hatred, that weapon so base, that she wielded that day with a smile on her face. And she slashed it and plunged it and drained me of blood. But the life was within me, it grew as it could. And my children, dear children, they watched from afar as their father succumbed. Don't go, sweet papa. What's there in the background? The hands never stop, relentlessly onwards, tick-tocking, tick-tock. And they alter my person, my children as well, and steer to the dark side of my living hell. But then I met you. You relit my fire. You made me feel human. You made me desire to live again. Oh, and your touch was sublime. And God, he made woman, for you were divine. Flames of pure passion, infernos of lust. I want to be with you till I turn to dust. And you nod and agree and sucker me in and show me the meaning of personal sin. And I'm lost in your arms. and I'm lost in your thighs. I need look no further than into your eyes, for there I see lust and a gift for all men, as we dance the lambada below sheets once again. And the passion within me, it rises yet higher, whilst you are impaled on my sexual desire. And it's earthy, organic. Oh, babe, it's unreal. And the love that we make is fucking surreal. But sex on its own, no matter how good, just isn't enough. Though the orgasms flood our emotions and cover the cracks, relationships fail when they're on different tracks. Then it's pain again. Pain again, pain till the end. That's it. No more hurting, for I can't pretend that the scars I exhibit will ever repair, as I drop to the depths of my human despair. And I wallow in pity, I wallow in pain, and I shed salty tears again and again. But maybe, just maybe, there's someone out there who'll love me, who'll help me, who'll heal me with care. If not, then my children, it's me on my own. Don't lay me down yet or plan words for that stone, for I've been there. And now, I say, now let's move on. There's a time to lament, and it's after I'm gone. Thank you.
Pretty hard-hitting stuff, that, and I think a lot of people could relate to that. In fact,
yeah, it's real life. Real life isn't always a chocolate box.
no,
Real life can be a lot of pain. You know, what doesn't kill us, they say, makes us stronger. I haven't been killed.
no,
In researching that poem, I was still able to write it. So yeah, it's scary, life is, but it's to be lived and to be enjoyed where you can. But it's, you know, we have to be reminded sometimes that not everyone finds life easy, and maybe some of my writing will make people think and challenge their concepts of, you know, normal living. What is normal living? You know, normal living to me and you might be extreme to other people. So, you know, that's the idea of some of my work. I like to challenge people.
well, I mean, you know, you've got to, if you're putting your poetry out there and it's speaking, you know, volumes about your personal experience, and you know, people can actually, even if they haven't been in that space, through words alone, they can actually understand how it is on the shoe is on the other foot sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. They don't have to experience it themselves to be able to appreciate that life isn't easy for everyone.
No.
You know, life isn't easy for many people these days, and it doesn't hurt to remind people sometimes that life can be hard and life can be challenging. It's good to prick their consciences sometimes, I find. Yeah. I'm not trying to prove a point by doing so. I just want to be real and true to the way I feel. I mean, that's what stimulates me to write anyway.
Yeah.
A lot of injustices. And sometimes not only injustices, but the hard, cold facts of life need to be relayed to people. Yeah. So if I can do it through some of my work, then, you know, I enjoy that.
Yeah.
You know, even though the poetry might be quite harsh and quite painful to a lot of people, it's there as a reflection of society in general.
Yeah. I know you said you wrote that yesterday. How long did it actually take you to put that and refine it?
It took me about 2 hours to put together, in all honesty. And I actually refined it this morning when I wrote it in the book to bring tonight.
Yeah.
I only made a couple of small changes because as I'm writing it, because I tend to perform a lot of my poetry, I'm reading it out loud and I'm walking around and I experiment a lot with it before I actually complete the poem. Yeah. The poem itself probably took me half an hour to write. Yeah. But I say 2 hours because I was constantly reciting it, and then if a word didn't sound right or it didn't flow as the way I wanted it to flow, then I'd change it throughout. So 2 hours, and I changed possibly half a dozen words today when I wrote it by hand.
Yeah, because I know when I write poetry and stuff, you know, I never orate it, so I've never got to that stage where I'm happy with it. Have you got any tips for people that, you know, are quite shy and get out there? You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Any exercises that you think they'd be able to use?
I think people would benefit from reading their work out aloud. If you're in a position where you can do it without anyone being there, as you write it, walk around with your book, or if it's on a computer screen, on a monitor screen, read from the screen. You can listen then to how it comes out, and you can maybe stress certain words that you want to stress by reading it aloud. I find it helps me immensely. I mean, it's not going to be to everyone's
I suppose you can enforce a word to stick out.
Yeah, by stressing the word, or by pausing before it, or afterwards even.
Yeah.
My poetry is more for the performance, more for the stage than it is for the book.
Yeah.
There's a lot of my poems that probably wouldn't look good in print. But saying that, they go down well when I perform them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, it depends what you want to do. If you want to write for a book, then, you know, I wouldn't suggest you stand up and read everything and learn it. And
I suppose there's a different type of refinement with written.
Yeah, I think for a book, you don't have to rely on how a live audience will react.
Yeah.
Very much the sort of stuff I write is to be performed in public. And I can see by people's faces when I'm performing, whether it's going down well. And then basically you get a feel for not only your audience and what you get away with and what you can perform in front of them, but also whether they like the sort of stuff you're writing about, whether they like the language you're using. Obviously, I don't use expletives if it's a younger audience.
Yeah.
I sort of temper my work and read stuff that I know will go down fairly well. You know, it might not be my better stuff, it might not be my more dramatic stuff, but it's, you know, you have to safeguard yourself against getting a bad name.
So I suppose when you go in there, every audience is different.
Yeah, absolutely.
So basically, you've got to set a benchmark by doing something maybe a soft, and then move on to one that, you know, you're getting visual feedback all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, if somebody is going, they know they're going to see something like John Cooper Clarke, they know what they're in for.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, but, you know,
well, he's an icon of British poetry. You know, the man stands up there alone.
Yes.
He has been since the late 70s.
Yeah.
And as far as John Cooper Clarke goes, you know, I can't see anyone going to watch John Cooper Clarke who've never heard of him before or not sort of read or seen videos of him performing in the past.
Yeah.
Whereas someone like me who's very new to the scene, you know, a lot of people won't have heard of me. And then when you've got the audience there, you play to that audience. I might throw one in that's a bit risque and see how that goes down. And if it's sort of greeted quite positively, then I might up the ante a bit and read something with a bit more edge.
Yeah.
But I certainly like to read stuff that's and perform stuff that's quite challenging. So, you know, quite often it's a journey for the audience as well as it is for myself.
Yeah.
You know, because it's a two-way thing. The performance and those who are listening in.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to see people's body language, you know, and so on.
Generally, it's a case of ducking when the oranges are thrown. Luckily, I like oranges and I got a big carrier bag.
Or pineapples.
Pineapples in my case, yeah.
Is that where Arthur came from? I don't know.
Yeah, well, you were quite right when you said about the haircut. Yeah. That's where I get Arthur Pineapple from.
Yeah.
That's my Facebook
persona.
I can't even think of the word then. But, yes, you catch me there.
Oh, well, here comes Matthew back. Have you got any news on questions?
Got a couple of questions. One for you, though, I'm afraid.
Oh, don't worry about that. That's good. I can rest my voice.
Are we ready to bring the rest of the group in?
Yes, yeah, we are indeed. I think we've just about wrapped up with...
yeah, thanks very much, Robbie.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Matthew.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Right.
And I shall bring the rest of the group in now.
We're going to bring the rest of them in now, and we will do some of the questions and answers. If there are any questions and answers that come in after, you know, I mean, I'm sure we can get feedback for you and put them either on Poetshub or on Dylan Thomas' Birthplace. Okay, we're just bringing everybody in now.
Very serious stuff. Funny laughs as well. Excellent. Where do you want us to sit?
I think Matthew's bringing some seats in now. If you just have a seat by here now, and I'll go and grab some more seats.
We'll always try and make it more handsome.
So, folks, this is pretty much an open mic session now. So if anybody would sit directly in front of the camera and let rip with some more poetry, or a story, or what have you, so feel free. Feel free. I thought John was going to sit down.
I will. No, I'm going to sit down.
Oh, excellent. There we are.
Well, you know, I was.
So once again, we've got Steve Garrett joining us. And,
are we on?
Yes, we're still on. We're still on.
We were never on. Right, just go for it. Is it?
Yeah, just let.
Okay. Match of the night. This one is called. I'm going to take a leaf out of the idea of sitting a little bit closer to the screen, getting a little bit more connection here. Okay. I should perhaps just say, as it's getting later in the evening, and perhaps we can move into slightly more raw territory. But anyway, this poem was inspired by a woman friend of mine who told me that she began to realize that her marriage was on shaky ground when the only physical relationship she had with her husband was on the nature of her being on her knees while during the intermission of Match of the Day. I'll leave the rest to your imagination. So this is called Match of the Night, as a kind of response to that. Let's play. I promise a level field. You can kick off, dribble around me as much as you want. I'll only offer token resistance, and you'll always be on side. You're free to try any kicks you like, by mutual agreement, of course. There are no other rules and no penalties. Handball is permitted, and my tackle will be friendly. If I take a dive, it'll only be to keep the game exciting for both of us. I'll put the ball in your net whenever you want, but always let you through. But just don't let me score too soon. The game will just stop for rest and refreshments, and the only thing getting blown then will be the final whistle. Right, what's next?
Next. Next.
Otherwise, I'll do another.
I haven't actually decided on one yet. Okay.
Can I ask why you decided, Natalie? Have you started on your supermarket poems yet?
I haven't started my supermarket poem yet, but I've had some really interesting baskets come up to my checkout that could end up as poems. I've not had any more vodka and razor blades. That looked like an interesting one. Okay. This one's called, I might have done this one before, but this one's called In Time. My lovers jut out the photographs like broken bones. In time, I will shrug them off coolly, pack them off like bad children running away from home. In time, they will not hurt me. My 20-year-old lover on a keyring had a smile like a shattered plate. I liked his crooked ways. His broken lips were a masterpiece put back together. I feel his mouth blowing out the photographs of my perfumed neck, sucking my petaled ear. I pressed to his light like a flower, chased his sly rays, his dirty, vanishing glow. You were awkward in that smoky night, despite your northern swagger, sleek head charm and trimmed moustache, floating a nervous millimeter above your lip. Still, it didn't move you from boy to man when I touched you with the light on and you hid yourself, shy as a rabbit. Every room felt like a crime scene. our outlined shapes in chalk on the bed, from those nights when we half bothered to arrange ourselves like lovers, and not two friends with over-familiar bodies. Some nights, the crease of your hip was unbearable, warm nut of your nipple, tedious. Some nights we cheated with sleep, the shape of you more stubborn, more real than the tuft. I stowed them away in the attic. In time I will twist an old lipstick, blow the dust off the frames, and sit there, quietly picking blood from a curly old wound.
Any other poems or pieces that would like to be said tonight? So, speak now or forever hold your peace.
I've got a couple of questions to answer on my
We
spot, but anybody who wants to read the poem should do that.
I think if you've got any
I read one more?
Excellent.
Okay.
Steve, yeah.
I mean, never say no to an opportunity to.
Yeah,
That's part of being a writer, isn't it? Looking for opportunities. For. Look, this was in response to this answer about what inspires poems, and this was just one of those simple things. Around the corner from where I live, there's a subway that you go through to get onto the railway line, and very often there is a woman sitting there playing the accordion, or apparently playing the accordion. And it was only one day that I happened to stay there longer than the 2 seconds it takes to ride through to actually listen to what she was playing, to discover that she wasn't actually playing at all, just making accordion-y noises, but pretty much getting away with it because no one actually stuck around to listen to it. Anyway, this poem was inspired by that. And I find that an everyday incident like that then inspires connections with other parts of life. And the poem is an attempt to sort of join things up a little bit. So this is called Underground Music. She's there each day, shapeless, with vacant eyes, an accordion clutched close like a frightened child in need of comfort, while her fingers ramble randomly over the keys. And what might be mistaken as melody is revealed on closer listening to be just collections of notes, members of a dysfunctional musical family, desperate to get away from each other, but somehow fated to be together. I used to imagine that with time's passing, a miraculous music held captive would one day flow freely through her fingertips, liberated through that box of reeds and wood to hang brightly in the dank air, reaching out to a spirit in all of us with an invitation to forget everything for one moment and dance. But her soul has stayed closed. Times in my own life have felt like this, when no harmony could be conjured from skills or circumstance. Going through the motions in the hope that connectedness would one day return to embrace me like a prodigal child, with tears of remorse over time lost and of joy for what was yet to be found.
Well, I think that's everybody now, I suppose, for tonight. So we've just got a few questions that have been asked, mainly for John about the collected poems and Dylan's works. John, if you'd like to take a seat with me. I'll read out a couple of the questions that we had. The first one, John, is what is the relevance of Dylan's poetry for 21st century Wales? Is there any relevance of his work to the UK as a whole?
Yeah, I know the person who asked this question actually, so I'll try and answer it in a way which I think might satisfy him. I think maybe partly I answered that when I read out the poem, part of the film script called The Old Young Men. Yeah. That's Dylan Thomas with a social conscience. That's Dylan Thomas aware of the effects of recession and mass unemployment and so on. That's the Dylan Thomas we write today. And his early poems, although they can be obscure, are often about the threat or the effects of war and psychic wounding. And that's something that's relevant today as well. To go back to the beginning of the question, what relevance do the poems have for Wales today? Well, first of all, I think they're universal, you know, in their message, but they could be said to say something to Wales in the sense that, you know, they teach us about the need for poetry to do things that are different with language, not just be versified diary entries, but maybe to try and push the boundaries of language a bit. And possibly that's easier to do, or it's more capable of being done in places that are the so-called margins, where you have more of a license to mess around with the received structures of the English language. I think one of the things that empowers the great Irish novelist James Joyce in his experiments with language, in novels like Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake, is precisely this fact that where he comes from, English isn't standard, it's not settled. It's something that is a recent, fairly recent overlay. And it's the same in Wales as well, where another language exists. So this particular language, English, isn't set, it's not fixed, and it's not the only language game in town. So the message would be maybe for Welsh poets who write in a staid or a boring or a too metropolitan-centric way, loosen up a bit, try and do things different. So that would be a poetic message. And I think there are, you know, poetry doesn't convey messages in one sense anyway, but if you wanted to extract something from the poetry which would have relevance, and again, I'm not sure that poetry should necessarily have relevance in that, you know, one-to-one sense, where that journalism does, or history does, or even most novels do. I'm not sure it should have that kind of relevance, but there is some, you know, in the way that you handle language, and also in the way that poetry can be made to convey, you know, social tension, the way that our bodies are bound up in language and history. And then in the question of the UK, well, I just generalise it a bit more. You know, there are too many poets who like mainstream, middle-brow, easy-going stuff, and maybe they should think about doing more radical things with the language, like Dylan did. I mean, there are people who did take a cue from Dylan after he died. The great Scottish poet W.S. Gray, for example, is one example. Sylvia Plath, I would say, is a poet who's very heavily into Dylan Thomas and does things that are interesting in language, things that are different. Ted Hughes, you know, and these kind of more experimental, more extreme areas of writing are maybe what could be learned from Dylan Thomas now. He has that kind of significance for poetry in the 21st century. But, you know, he writes about war. He's the first great poet of civilians being killed in air raids. You know, how relevant is that today? You could transpose what he says about children dying in London in the Blitz to Homs and Fallujah. He's a poet of eco-awareness. You know, his later poems are some of the first great green poems in 20th century English poetry. That's something that's burning relevance to us today. And finally, he doesn't like separating the mind from the body. A lot of people write as though my ego is over here, my writing self is over here, and my body's over there. They're two separate things. You know, if you read Dylan Thomas's contemporaries like Auden, that's the way they deal with the body. But Dylan gets you into it, and he tries to show you that there's no real severance between mind and body. We think with the body and we feel through the mind. The two things go together, and that's the way that, you know, modern theorists of the brain and the body are beginning to think now. He anticipates that.
Of course, he's very much a man of his age, obviously, in his thinking, and his poetry too. And as you said, it can be carried through right through to the day, I think, and the examples that you give, I think that gives a very good argument.
Yeah, he's an exemplary poet for the early 21st century. There's a lot to be learned from him.
Absolutely. So thank you very much for answering that one.
Okay.
We have another one.
There's only one more.
And
folks, your deal will soon be over.
This is, what is the meaning of lie still, sleep be calm?
Okay, well, this is a poem that Dylan wrote. And again, I know who the questioner is. I won't betray them there. So I'll try and answer in a way I think would satisfy them. This is a sonnet that Dylan wrote in 1941, if I remember rightly, and it's possibly the last poem he wrote before we had this gap in the middle of the war. Shall I read it out? It's quite short. Lie still, sleep becalmed, suffer with the wound in the throat, burning and turning. All night afloat on the silent sea, we have heard the sound that came from the wound wrapped in the salt sheet. Another mile off moon, we trembled, listening to the sea sound flowing like blood from the loud wound. And when the salt sheet broke in a storm of singing, the voices of all the drowned swam on the wind. Open a pathway through the slow, sad sail, throw wide to the wind the gates of the wandering boat, for my voyage to begin to the end of my wound. We heard the sea sound sing, we saw the salt sheet tell. Lie still, sleep becalmed, hide the mouth in the throat, or we shall obey and ride with you through the drown. So that's a sonnet. There are 4 sections, 4 quatrains of 4 lines each, and a couplet at the end. There are various ways of understanding it. One thing is that Dylan Thomas's father suffered from cancer in the mouth, and this suffer with a wound in the throat is, at one level, Dylan Thomas's father, and maybe it's the fear of the recurrence of the cancer that his father had. He was treated for it in 1933-34. Radium-tipped needles inserted into the tumour. Not at all. So there's that. I also think the imagery here, with the salt sheet and the mile off moon trembling and the sea sound, perhaps relates to the war. Right. You know, when I read this poem, I see somebody whose boat has been torpedoed, who's lying on a raft there in the middle of the Atlantic, the moon shining down over the sea, somebody adrift. So maybe this is a reflection in some way on the convoys that were being torpedoed and the terrible loss of life of sailors, of seafarers at that time. But I also think it's about the poet and about poetry as well, because so many of Dylan Thomas's poems are about that. So the wound is poetry, and the sea sound and the voice and the storm of singing is poetry itself. If you wanted to make, you know, a more complete sense of it, you might want to break it up and say, well, there's a speaker here and a different speaker there. Some critics have done that, and they've said that the first 8 lines are one voice, and they're saying, lie still, sleep becalmed. They're trying to ease some sufferer in a sick bed, you know, to sleep. And then the sufferer himself speaks in the lines that they can open a pathway through the slow, sad sail. And those 4 lines are in another voice. And then finally, in the last 2, the collective we comes back again. Lie still, sleep becalmed, hide the mouth in the throat, or we shall obey and ride with you through the drowned. So it's almost as though those who are trying to comfort the sufferer don't want to be sucked down, don't want to be drawn into his pain, don't want to drown it. But it's an ambiguous poem. It doesn't want to be read in any single way. It wants you to have at least 2 or 3 narratives going on when you read it. It does that very successfully. So I don't know if I can say what it means, but I can say those are some of the possible meanings.
Excellent. Well, that's great. Thank you very much, John, for answering our only 2 questions, unfortunately, tonight.
Does anybody in the room have any questions?
Well, yeah, if you'd like to shoot any questions to anybody here tonight, you've been sat in that study with and hear some of their works, you're more than welcome to. Thanks, guys.
So better luck next time.
I guess all that's left to say is thank you very much once again for joining us. This first Wednesday of the month, a hugely important month here, obviously, because it's the month in which Dylan was born. And on the 27th of October this month, Dylan will be 100 years old. So let the celebrations commence, and let's carry it forward for many years to come as well. It's about really this year being another launching point and creating another a legacy, a proper lasting legacy for Dylan. So thank you very much for joining us. And thank you everybody else in the room. Where are you? You look so blank on the screen. You should all gather round, I think, and not on the screen. They are still here, folks. They are still here. So all we have to do really is to say goodbye. So goodbye from goodbye from Robbie as well, obviously, and goodbye from everybody here tonight. Thank you very much.
Cheers.